The ANC will hold a media briefing at 2 this afternoon, at which is expected to formally announce the decisions taken by its NEC on President Jacob Zuma's future. Meanwhile, the EFF's motion of no confidence is in the spotlight today as National Assembly Speaker Mbeki faces a deadline to bring it forward or face court action. The High Court in Cape Town is expected to hear an urgent application by City Mayor Patricia de Lilles this morning in relation to the vote of no confidence against her.
It's never down and out. We always want looking to fight back.
Now that the Proteas have averted a series whitewash in their ODI rumble against India, the next mission is to draw the series starting today.
Hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. A lot coming up between now and 12 p.m, including the latest from the ANC government transition, your views, as well as more news from the African continent. Of course, I'm not alone. Kenda Makmate is standing by with all your sporting highlights. Very good morning to you. Very happy Tuesday to you, Kenda. Are you good?
Good morning, Shante. Very good to be back here. Tell you what, the big story for today is how the Proteas are going to go against India out in St. George's Park.
Yeah, and speaking of which, let's talk about the social media video that's doing the rounds with Imran Tahir.
Now that's a story. Imran Tahir getting abused racially by a fan in the stands. Make sure you stay with us because that's something that's going to be making the rounds for a little bit longer, and we'll be covering it a little later in the bulletin.
In your top story at 9 o'clock, South Africa is now waiting for confirmation from the ANC that the National Executive Committee has decided to recall President Jacob Zuma. A media briefing from Luthuli House is expected at 2 o'clock today. SABC News understands the decision to recall was reached after a marathon 13-hour-long NEC meeting, which started on Monday outside Irene in Pretoria. The closed session concluded at around 3 a.m. this morning without any confirmation from the ANC on its resolutions. Well, sources say the SABC says that the highest decision-making body resolved to recall President Zuma. President Jacob Zuma allegedly rejected an ultimatum to resign within 48 hours or face recall. It's believed that this resolution was communicated to President Zuma by ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and Secretary General Ace Magashule at his official residence in Pretoria late last night. Well, some reports have said that the president asked for a further 3 months in office. The presidency has meanwhile not verified these statements or whether the president has agreed to in fact step down.
From our sources is that the decision has been taken by the NEC to recall President Jacob Zuma. So the 13th of February, the day that has where the NEC sat down and decided that President Jacob Zuma must be recalled as the president of the country, the president of the republic in the highest office in the land. Speaking to our sources who said that we'll have to wait a bit for the Secretary General of the party, Ace Magashule, to come and give us more details with regards to the decision that has been taken by the NEC.
Speculation is rife that the ANC is under pressure to take a swift decision on President Zuma's future before a motion of no confidence is passed against him. The motion is currently set down for the 22nd of February. The EFF has threatened that if they don't receive a satisfactory reply from the National Assembly Speaker, Mbeki, by 10 o'clock this morning, they will approach the High Court to compel her to reschedule the motion. SABC presidential correspondent Nzwandile Mbeki elaborates on the matter.
They are racing against time, so they need to make a decision, and a decision now. I mean, if you listened to the president of the ANC yesterday in Cape Town, so clear that they want to finalize this issue because they want to take it away from the opposition. Because people who've been calling for President Zuma to resign has been the opposition parties. Let's say he finally steps down through a motion of no confidence. The ANC can never claim any credit for that. In fact, it will embolden the opposition because the opposition will have initiated the process. So next year is election time. So what will stop people from voting for opposition when the opposition will simply say, yes, we made it possible for Zuma to go, and Zuma went. So what was the ANC doing? So they're trying to reclaim some of the lost ground.
On President Jacob Zuma's future, we're now joined from our Pretoria studio by political analyst Levi Ndou. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, the ANC will hold a media briefing this afternoon. What are we expecting come that briefing?
Good morning, Shante. Good morning to the viewers at home. Obviously, one would expect the ANC not to be quite detailed about what happened at the meeting last night. Even though some of us expected the meeting to be very, very short, it took an unfortunate turn. But what one would expect at the media briefing today would be the way forward that the ANC has to provide. The ANC has to put forward the message to South Africans as to whether, when is President Zuma resigning, or if there were challenges, what are the bold steps that the ANC has actually taken in order to ensure that President Zuma moves out of office and the country has to go back to normality.
Now, Levi, some reports say that President Zuma was given 48 hours to resign. What steps can the ANC take if Zuma does not resign in these 48 hours?
Well, I think first of all, one must indicate that President Zuma is the deployee of the ANC in government. And obviously, President Zuma has to take orders from the ANC. And if the ANC requests him or asks him to resign, and then he refuses, obviously then it's a clear indication that the president is defying the party that deployed him to parliament. And then the ANC has to develop new strategies to ensure that he gets out of office. Firstly, would be an ultimatum that they've given to him. And obviously, if the question of the ultimatum does not work, then they will have to use the parliamentary processes to ensure that he gets out of office. But one other area that we need not forget is that the current leadership of the ANC has emphasized that they would love to see President Zuma getting out of office in a much dignified manner. And I think it's up to President Zuma to choose whether he wants to get out of office in a dignified manner or he wants to be embarrassed by being removed through parliamentary processes. I don't think that is what the ANC wanted, and I also don't think that is what President Zuma wants. And I hope that sanity might prevail, and then President Zuma would have to tender his resignation for his own dignity, for the interests of the party, and the interests of all South Africans.
Levi, this is not the first time that the ANC wants to recall a sitting president. What seems to be the core problem in the ruling party?
You will recall that just before the conference in Polokwane, when it was clear that President Zuma is going to contest for presidency and President Mbeki was also contesting, there started this new saying of the two centers of power. Those who wanted President Zuma to be the president of the ANC, and knowing that he's going to be the president of the country, presented a view that says that if President Mbeki wins and he becomes the president of the ANC, two centers of power is going to be visible. And in my view, they knew the weaknesses that President Zuma has, and they also knew that the center lies with the ANC. So they did not want the kind of a situation where there was going to be a contestation between President Zuma and President Mbeki. And that is what brought this situation now. But at the current moment, we are in a totally different scenario. There's more reasons why people would love to see President Zuma exiting office because of a number of factors that have been highlighted before on numerous occasions. And I think that is one area that we need to look at. But also at the same time, what we need to see in South Africa happening today is the ANC that must be seen to be leading and ensuring that South Africans don't get frustrated by the political processes that are actually unpacking now. And I think this is one of the biggest tests that the current leadership of the ANC is actually facing today.
Now, there are also reports that say Ramaphosa told the NEC that Zuma had initially agreed to resign in their Tuesday meeting, but then Zuma wanted to put 3 months to stay in office as a condition. If this report is anything to go by, what could he possibly want to do in the next 3 months that he can't do in the next 48 hours?
Well, firstly, Shante, you cannot be surprised by this. Remember, when President Zuma was requested to resign years back in 2005, he initially agreed, but in the last minute, he actually changed the tune and said, no, I'm not ready to resign, and he played victim. But I think at this stage, President Zuma does not want to be seen as a person who has been pushed out of government, either by the opposition and by his party. And that's why he actually requested a 3-month extension. And he wanted to be seen as a person who actually offered to resign. But I think also, I don't think this is the discussion that they wanted the public to know. But unfortunately now we know that President Zuma wanted an extension. But another thing that I suspect is that maybe President Zuma wanted to ensure that some of the initiatives or projects that he has actually initiated, which might not be in the best interest of everyone, he wanted these projects to be finalized because of personal enrichment or enriching certain individuals. If the ANC or the government is working as a collective, you wouldn't need any individual to insist on continuing, because in any way, these projects can still be continued by other people. The point here, we're talking about the nuclear energy that has been in the lips of a lot of people. And I think maybe it's one other project that President Zuma wants to see it finalized. But unfortunately, the leadership of the ANC has got other ideas, and that's why they've given him an ultimatum of only 48 hours.
Now, if Zuma is forced to resign, can he actually take this matter to the CCMA or any higher power for unfair dismissal?
Well, this is a political appointment. It requires political processes. What President Zuma has to do is for me, is that he must actually toe the line of his political party, or actually look at the motion of no confidence in Parliament, or rather the impeachment. President Zuma is a politician. His activities requires political solutions, and I think President Zuma knows much better. And in the interest of all of us, one would expect President Zuma to act in a manner that is in the best interest of his political party, the ANC, and the general South African population.
If we compare the fallout with the former President Mbeki to what's happening now with President Jacob Zuma, what are the similarities that we can draw?
Well, the similarities here in the main is that the National Executive Committee of the party that deployed the president has requested them to resign. President Mbeki did not even hesitate to heed the call of the party that deployed him. And that is why, in a very, very shortest period of time given, President Zuma tendered his resignation and then resigned. And that, to me, is a clear indication of a person who understands the party that sent him to office and respect that party. And in the main, that's a clear indication of a disciplined member of a political organization. With President Zuma, who is facing a number of issues surrounding himself as an individual, it becomes very, very difficult. And that, to me, it's an indication that President Zuma does not respect his party. He is not a disciplined member of the ANC. And that is why he would say, I'm prepared to resign. And when he meets another group, he will say, I'm not prepared to resign. And those are the main differences. But also, if you look at the circumstances in which President Mbeki was removed from office, it's totally different circumstances now. It is very clear that President Zuma's work in the ANC, in government, has created a huge dent to the organization, which is actually going to take a very, very long time to repair, unlike what happened with former President Mbeki. And for me, those are the differences between the two leaders and the circumstances surrounding the two.
Now, lastly, Levi, for the past few days, would it be a fair statement to say that the ANC, to some extent, has been holding the country hostage? Who has been running the country when the entire ANC leadership has been in closed meetings?
The former president of the ANC and the president of the South African Republic, Mr. Jacob Zuma, is very central in holding South African state at ransom. And I think it is time that he gets a proper advice that South Africa need to move forward. There are serious challenges facing South Africa, and President Zuma cannot hold the entire republic at ransom. Those that are very close to him, those ministers that he appointed, some incompetent, some corrupt, must assist President Zuma in advising him to ensure that South Africa has to move forward, and he must do the honorable thing by getting out of office so that South Africa must be able to move forward.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, political analyst Levi Ndou, as we take you through that build-up to that much-awaited meeting that is expected to take place around midday this afternoon. Earlier, SABC News also spoke to Advocate Mbeki about what the possible recall or impeachment of President Jacob Zuma would mean in terms of the constitution in South Africa.
It depends on what the position is, what approach they want to take. So the Constitution itself contains two provisions regarding the removal of the president from office. The one is Section 89, which is what generally is referred to as impeachment. This other is Section 102, which is a motion of no confidence. Both of those can only take place under the supervision of Parliament. So the ANC, as a dominant party in Parliament, could sponsor one of those two motions. It could sponsor an impeachment proceedings. There is already a judgment by the Constitutional Court that gives a framework for impeachment proceedings. The second is that it could sponsor a motion of no confidence. Now, if it sponsors a motion of no confidence, it's sufficient that it no longer has confidence in the president. That is sufficient to trigger a recall. But that is a process to be undertaken by Parliament. On the other hand, an impeachment is premised on grounds of misconduct or violation of the Constitution. Already, there is a prima facie case as in relation to a possible impeachment, and already there is a process underway in Parliament. So what they would have to do, at least constitutionally speaking, is to support a motion of no confidence or to initiate a motion of no confidence in Parliament.
Some other news, the High Court in Cape Town is expected to hear an urgent application by City Mayor Patricia de Lilles this morning in relation to the vote of no confidence against her in a council meeting planned for Thursday. De Lilles, who's been embroiled in allegations of corruption and mismanagement, wants the High Court to rule on the use of a secret ballot for the vote. Last week, the DA Federal Council asked de Lilles to withdraw the application, saying it's premature. De Lilles insists she's going ahead with the urgent application despite an earlier request by her party's senior leadership to withdraw. In a statement, de Lilles said she wanted all councillors in the city of Cape Town to be free to vote according to their conscience, whether in favour or against the motion of no confidence against her. De Lilles says there has been attempts to intimidate her to withdraw the court application. Well, the state has asked the High Court in Cape Town to convict triple murder accused Henry van Breda on all 5 charges against him. A state advocate, Susan Galloway, yesterday concluded her closing arguments in the case. Van Breda is accused of murdering his parents and brother with an axe, and also the attempted murder of his younger sister, Marley, at their De Zalze estate home in Stellenbosch in January of 2015. The defence is expected to submit its closing arguments today.
According to the state, Henry van Breda's version that his family came under attack by an axe-wielding intruder should be excluded. Advocate Susan Galloway says it's unlikely that an intruder could have entered and left the security estate undetected after committing the murders. She's also submitted that no foreign DNA was found at the crime scene. The state says both the knife and axe used in the attack were the property of the Van Brodas, and that it's unlikely that the intruders would have faced a random attack unarmed. She's also dismissed the notion of a hit on the Van Broda family. Henry Van Broda's demeanour following the attack and the 2-hour 40-minute lapse in time between the attacks, as well as when he first called for help, have again been highlighted. Galloway says the injuries sustained by Henry Van Broda were unusually superficial given the attack. The state says when evaluating the proven facts, the circumstantial evidence before the court is so overwhelming that the only reasonable inference is that Van Broda attacked and killed his family. Van Broda faces 3 counts of murder, 1 of attempted murder and 1 of obstructing the administration of justice. Vanessa Puna, SABC News, Cape Town.
And on to news from the business world now. The Bank of Baroda says it is committed to supporting its customers and employees following its decision to exit the local market. Well, yesterday, the South African Reserve Bank confirmed that Bank of Baroda notified the Register of Banks of its exit. The Indian bank was the last remaining institution to continue doing business with the Gupta family, through which its companies allegedly laundered money.
The Bank of Baroda was the last remaining bank to continue doing business with the Gupta family after the big 4 banks cut ties with them. The bank reported 45 suspicious transactions by Gupta-owned companies amounting to 4.2 billion rand to the Financial Intelligence Center between September 2016 and July 2017. Last year, the FIC fined the Bank of Baroda 1 million rand for flaunting anti-corruption laws. Analysts say the bank's association with the Gupta family has done a heavy blow to its image.
I think it's a case of their association with the Gupta family has kind of tainted their name in South Africa. The Bank of Baroda is a very large company. It's much larger than you would think based just on South African operations. It's the 2nd largest bank in India in terms of assets. We're talking about in excess of $100 billion, which is pretty significant even in the US or in the developed world. And it has operations in many, many countries around the world, Australia, Mauritius, I think about 20-something countries around the world there's offices.
The Bank of Baroda has a market capitalization of 80 billion rand.
They were a very, very small player in South Africa. We have a very large, very stable banking sector. And it's not like they're saying they're leaving South Africa because of the difficulty of the South African business environment or anything wrong with South Africa. It's more a case of that they're leaving South Africa because of mistakes that their people have made in South Africa in terms of some of their associations, etc., and some of their business decisions.
The Bank of Baroda, which is expected to close shop by the end of March, says it will not be taking any deposits from the beginning of March. But analysts say the bank, which operates in 24 other countries, is not off the hook yet and might face criminal charges if they are implicated in the looming state capture investigation. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Have a look at our SABC Newsroom question of the day. Today we're asking you, what do you expect from the ANC's midday presser? Send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom on Twitter. We'll have a look at some of the tweets after the break.
When life takes a different turn.
If I didn't eat the speak, he was going to evict me.
Your will to persevere is ignited.
I'm not a professional speaker, but I'll try my best to give you a word of inspiration.
He was just trying to provide for his family.
If you can't accept it, change it. If you cannot change it, accept it.
And a new story begins.
Made a resolve to myself. I'm learning something new.
Upilong, every Friday at 5:30. Be part of the life-changing journey.
News at 9. We go beyond the headlines of the day's breaking news to bring you all the angles and in-depth analysis of stories. We go beyond the surface, including on how it will impact your life. Join us every day at 9 to zoom in on the day's big stories.
Welcome back to SABC Newsroom. Of course, our question of the day today, we ask, what do you expect from the ANC's midday presser? Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have come through already this morning. This one coming in from Ule saying, nothing as usual, short and sweet. Well, it has been meeting after meeting. Hopefully, come midday, we'll be able to get some answers. Michael says, I'm expecting Mr. JG Zuma to continue as presidency, and Cyril Ramaphosa must stay in his lane because his time is coming, and that's 2019. He will find out that running a country is not the same as being an executive of a mining company or owning all McDonald's in South Africa. Very strong views coming in there from Michael this morning. Let's have a look at our poll. Our poll question today, we're asking you, do you support calls by opposition parties to dissolve Parliament? Over 670 votes coming in. 59% of you are saying yes, 41% of you are saying no. In those tweets there, this one coming in from limit_th, I support that call of opposition parties 101%. My girl says, unless they elect brand new and fresh, incorruptible people for Parliament, then she of course agrees. Thank you very much for sending in our tweets. Let's have a look now at our picture of the day. This one comes in from Sylvia Opal. Well, most people had a sign to protest government oppression. My mother had me. Of course, Trevor Noah on growing up with interracial parents during apartheid, hashtag Super Soul Conversations. That was Trevor Noah's conversation that he had with Oprah Winfrey, of course. And our comment of the day, this one comes in from Nyambeni Mutlaudzi saying, so my way dialed directly to King's Wellatini to sell him insurance. Much respect. The comments of the day coming in there with My Way insurance sellers, and they get all of us. They even got the king this time. Let's have a look now at what's making headlines front page and center globally this morning in our newspapers. I will start off in Swaziland. Well, the Swaziland Observer reports that Parliament must be dissolved because it was complicit in President Jacob Zuma's failure to uphold the constitution, opposition parties have argued. Moving to Namibia, the Namibian says South Africans should be patient with the ruling African National Congress leader Cyril Ramaphosa as he talks to President Jacob Zuma for a transition of power, the party's national chairperson said last week. And finally, in New York, the Financial Times also reporting on South Africa this morning. South Africa's ruling ANC will order President Jacob Zuma to resign, according to people familiar with the decision, signaling an end to his scandal-hit rule and paving the way for Cyril Ramaphosa to take power. Let's have a look at what we can expect coming up after a break. The protesters clash with police in the Guinean capital of Conakry as tensions rise between opposition and government supporters, and the country awaits local election results.
And later in your sports.
I was also exonerated by Advocate Arendse in his judgment of Lenny Chwen.
The dirty laundry is being hung out to dry in the SASCO Commission of Inquiry, with all sides blaming each other for corruption, irregularities.
It would be really nice for us to expose the middle order, and hopefully we can see what they can do.
Proteas all-rounder Andile Petlukwayo feels the only way to get the better of India at St. George's Park is to take the fight to the tourists and get early wickets.
South Africa is in need of a frank dialogue about the state of our nation. My name is Onkgopotse JJ Tabane. Join me on Frankly Speaking every Sunday at 8:30. Come now, let's talk frankly.
The Public Protector Busisiwe Mqabane has recommended that the President act against Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Van Rooyen within 30 days. The United Nations has expressed its grave concern over allegations against 4 SANDF peacekeepers. Protesters clash with police in the Guinea capital of Conakry as tensions rise between opposition and government supporters, and the country awaits local election results. Well, yesterday, opposition parties said Parliament should be dissolved even if President Jacob Zuma steps down. The political parties met to plan a way forward on President Zuma's motion of no confidence scheduled for next week. Well, to unpack the recent political developments, we are now joined in our Durban studio by SABC political researcher Danesh Daraj. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us, Danesh. Can we say that the much-awaited wait is possibly over? Is there light at the end of the tunnel come this afternoon?
Well, good morning, Shante, and good morning to all the viewers of Channel 404. Yeah, it's been a very, very long wait all the way from last week, and we saw lots of developments happening over social media last night. All of us were camped out literally in a digital sense, looking at Facebook, looking at Twitter, waiting for some kind of sign from the ANC to say that eventually something's got to give. And we saw earlier on the ANC did release a statement that there will be a media briefing at 12, but then we heard again that media briefing has now been pushed to 2 o'clock this afternoon to allow for some processes to be satisfied. So hopefully we will get all the answers. I know lots of South Africans, the whole country is watching that space very, very closely. We saw what happened yesterday, the NEC meeting, possibly one of the National Executive Committee's longest NEC meetings ever held, I would assume. It started on Monday at 2 o'clock and only finished, we are said, around 3 this morning, this Tuesday morning. So hopefully we'll all get the answers that we are looking for and some clarity with regard to the future of the sitting South African President Jacob Zuma.
Now, by going through the route of a motion of no confidence, will the ANC not be playing in the hands of opposition parties? They've always demanded and wanted the motion and the removal of the president.
I think we have to remember that President Jacob Zuma has already faced 8 motions of no confidence in the National Assembly. The last one that he won very, very narrowly, you would recall last year in August, there was a secret ballot. We had some of the ANC MPs voting with the opposition. The vote was very, very close. I think the difference was just over 2021. It was 198 to 177. So the ANC does not want to take that risk, the added risk of damaging its name more, damaging its brand more, of possibly having another motion, the 9th motion of no confidence in a president that is deployed by the ANC. But I think also very importantly, what the ANC does not want to do is capitulate to the opposition parties, to somehow say that you are taking the credit for one of our deployees in government, in parliament. So what the ANC will probably want to do is probably speak to President Jacob Zuma, negotiate a settlement where he resigns in a dignified way and he steps out of the limelight and make way for the new administration that was elected at Nasrec in December 2017. As we know, the opposition parties have given the Speaker of the National Assembly, Mbeki, a deadline of 10 o'clock this morning. That deadline is just around 26 minutes away from this time. So let's see what happens at 10 o'clock this morning. If nothing gives, then obviously the EFF is threatening court action. It has said that it will approach the Western Cape High Court to possibly intervene in bringing that motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma a little ahead of the scheduled February 22nd motion of no confidence. But the ANC wants to avoid this at all costs because the ANC actually wants to take credit for one of its deployees. So the ANC will maybe initiate a motion of no confidence from their side. And, you know, like we saw last week, the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, he addressed the ANC's caucus in Parliament. He spoke to the leadership collective. So he will possibly intervene again. He will go to Parliament and advise the ANC MPs in Parliament. I know the ANC MPs number 249, and then obviously we have people in the NCOP, so the entire caucus, to vote against its sitting president, President Jacob Zuma. And, you know, this obviously would signal that President Jacob Zuma has to tender his resignation.
Of course, apart from that motion of no confidence, can we foresee Parliament actually being dissolved? We knew that this is another call from opposition parties saying regardless or even after President Jacob Zuma has resigned or he has been recalled, they would want Parliament to be dissolved and fresh elections to be called.
Again, Shanti, you would recall last year the DA tried to do that. The DA called for a motion to dissolve Parliament. Obviously, that did not succeed. So this will be the DA and the opposition party's second attempt at possibly dissolving Parliament. I don't think it will actually go to that level because the ANC, as the governing party, as the party with the most number of MPs in the National Assembly, will not want that. You know, primarily for the reasons that the ANC is not yet ready to campaign. We are said that the ANC will kickstart their election campaign for 2019, the 2019 general elections, as early as May this year. So the ANC is in a very weak position in that sense. So they know the opposition is on the prowl, the opposition is smelling blood, that there are cracks within, you know, within ANC ranks. There are two factions like we saw, you know, emerge at Nasrec. We had two very entrenched factions, one belonging to the victor, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the other obviously belonging to Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. So the ANC knows it's in a very, very weak position, and it would not want to go into elections this early because a lot of planning has to be done, a lot of campaigning has to be done. And very, very importantly, Shante, you would recall that in 2014, 2016, President Zuma was the ANC president. He's also the sitting president of South Africa. President Zuma, you know, according to our reports, is not well liked by the middle classes. And it is the middle classes that have been making all the noises, like we've seen on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. We saw the protest, Fees Must Fall, that was ignited in 2015 December. Then we saw the Zuma Must Fall protest that you know, came soon after the death and memorial of Amit Khatrada last year in March and April. They all call for Zuma to go. So there is this very big disconnect with the ANC and the so-called middle classes. The middle classes are, you know, the ANC takes a lot of credit for this, you know, for lifting up the middle classes, the black middle class in this country since 1994. You look at policies like BEE, affirmative action. So there is a disconnect, and the SG, the former SG of the ANC, has acknowledged this. He acknowledged this as early as the 2015 National General Council, where he says we need to reconnect with that segment of the voters' roll. And remember, every 5 years, the voters' roll is changing. The voters' roll is getting younger. We have people born after 1994 who don't necessarily identify with the ANC and identify with the ANC as a liberation party. So back in 2014, what the ANC did to reconnect with these middle classes, it sent Jacob Zuma, the ANC president and president of South Africa, to the rural areas to do campaigning in those areas. On the other hand, the ANC elected to send people like Thabo Mbeki, Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as Kgalema Motlanthe to campaign for the party to recapture that middle class and urban vote. The same thing happened in the 2016 local government elections. We all, you know, the ANC even acknowledged that they've lost touch with that urban black middle class. And that's the reason in April of that year, the Mail and Guardian you know, published a very prominent report saying that the ANC had recruited around 2,500 professionals, teachers, lawyers, you know, those kind of people to somehow get out the ANC's message that this is a party that still belongs to you. This is a party that the middle class can still identify with. So looking forward to the the elections that will be held next year. Remember, it has to be held between May and August 2019. But also, very, very importantly, what I said yesterday about the IEC, there is a June 2016 Constitutional Court judgment that I did mention yesterday, where the IEC was advised to get its voters' roll up to order and up to speed in terms of getting voters' addresses updated. And that deadline actually expires on the 30th of June this year. So the IEC will need to do a lot of planning, just to fill in those gaps of the 25% of those people who still do not have an address. Obviously, they still can go ahead, with the elections. Once an election date is announced, the IEC has around 90 days to plan for that. But like we saw this morning, the vice chairperson of the IEC actually confirming with Morning Live and Leanne Manners that despite that 90-day deadline, the IEC is prepared to run elections should it be called early in around 72 days or so.
And just before we wrap up, Ranesh, of course, speaking to Levi and Doe, political analyst, earlier, we were discussing the processes of actually a recall or a resignation, and it's not as easy as everybody thinks that it is. Essentially, what would the reasons be that the ANC-NEC would cite for the resignation or the recall of President Jacob Zuma in layman's terms?
I think very importantly, again, we have to remember that it's not very easy to remove a sitting president, and a president as powerful and strong as President Jacob Zuma. You would, you must remember, you have to take, cognizance of the fact that President Zuma represents a very powerful region within the ANC. He comes from KwaZulu-Natal. If you look at the statistics during President Zuma's, term as ANC president, he managed to increase ANC membership from a low 340,000 to 940,000. That's almost threefold in that 10 years. So that's point number one. Point number two, remember, for the very first time since the ANC's unbanning in 1990, the ANC in KZN does not have a representative in the ANC top 6 leadership structure, that was elected at Nasrec. So very important. And now that, the ANC is seen to be removing a sitting president that germinates from this very powerful province, I think that will prove very problematic. And that's the reason I also said a couple of weeks ago that the ANC has to be very cautious and very careful in the way they handle Jacob Zuma's possible resignation. And I think the last point that I need to make is that you also have to consider the fact that KZN, in a sense, is very significant electorally for the ANC. If you look at the stats between 1994 and 2014, only 2 provinces showed growth for the ANC, and KZN, to a certain extent, buoyed the results of the other declining provinces. The other province was Northern Cape, which increased just around 14% between 1994 and 2014, but KZN showed a growth of a massive 34%, and that 34% actually lifted the ANC's results, when the other provinces declined. So that's the reason the ANC, and especially Cyril Ramaphosa as the newly elected president and the top 6 leadership structure of the ANC that was elected at Nasrec, they have to be very, very careful. And that's also the reason that I mentioned in another show with Peter Ndoro that Jacob Zuma will resign, but that transition will not happen in a day or two. It will not happen in a week or two. I somehow predicted that it will take maybe a couple of months, maximum 3 months, maybe possibly before May and June this year.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Always good talking to you in the studio. Of course, researcher Ranesh Dawaj unpacking for us possibilities around the resignation and recall of President Jacob Zuma, as well as the other climate there around. Well, Public Protector Busisiwe Mqabane has recommended that the President act against the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Van Rooyen, within 30 days. The Public Protector found that he deliberately made a misleading statement to the National Assembly. Advocate Mqabane confirmed that Minister Van Rooyen lied when he denied visiting the Gupta's compound in Saxonwold in the run-up to his appointment as Finance Minister. He later admitted to visiting the Guptas in his capacity as Treasurer of the MKMVA. Mqabane also wants her report to be tabled in the National Assembly within 14 days of the President receiving the report. Some news abroad. The United Nations has expressed its grave concern over allegations against 4 SANDF peacekeepers. The peacekeepers stand accused of sexual exploitation and abuse, in addition to separate cases of physical violence perpetrated against a 17-year-old boy in the DRC. We will be giving you more details on this story later. Well, at least 2 men died on Monday in clashes between demonstrators and riot police in Guinea following protests over local election results. Protesters clashed with police in the Guinean capital of Conakry as tensions rise between opposition and government supporters. Protesters in the opposition stronghold of Ratoma threw stones at security forces who responded by firing tear gas and warning shots. Guinea has been gripped by most electoral tension that has fueled anti-government sentiment. At least 7 people died and 50 were arrested last week after Guineans went to the polls on the 4th of February in a long-delayed local election for mayors and neighborhood chiefs. The opposition last week said it would not accept results, claiming fraud. The violence is linked to opposition fears that President Alpha Conde will seek to change the constitution to seek a 3rd term at elections come 2020.
Thank you very much. It's time for the sports. Now, South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee President Gideon Sam has been accused of benefiting inappropriately from a business relationship with his former Vice President Hajra Kaji. This was evidence brought forward by former Athletics South Africa board member Lorraine Lane on the first day of the Ministerial Committee inquiry into SASCOC governance matters. Lane labelled SASCOC administrators as bullies.
Lane claimed that SASCOC administrators took hold of the Lotto Distribution Committee in 2010. Former Cricket South Africa President Ray Mali and Hajra Kaji also formed part of the committee, while Gideon Sam was the chairperson. Lane accused Kaji to have had a relationship with the company that manufactured Team South Africa's uniform at the previous Olympics.
I was also told by Benelli Sandani, who was tragically murdered 2 years ago, that Hajra Kaji is a relation of Sedgars owners. I think they're the Dockrats. Sedgars supply SASCOC with their uniforms and kits in which they take part overseas. If you remember, in the Beijing Olympics, the athletes refused to wear it because it was so ugly, and several times there have been outcries as to the ill-fitting, unattractive wear that is produced by Sedgars.
Lane, who was suspended by SASCOC for her part in the mishandling of the Caster Semenya saga in 2008, also gave a statement regarding the Semenya gender issue. Among other things, she claimed that Semenya did not sign an informed consent related to gender testing prior to the World Championships in Berlin 2009. She found SASCOC to be later complicit in how it handled the situation.
When the IAAF decided they would do full investigative tests, which includes a huge panel of medical professionals and psychologists, it took them a year to find out that she was a female, and they said Caster could run in the interim. SASCOC stopped Caster from running for that entire year. So yes, it does involve them, absolutely.
Earlier in the day, smaller federations gave their statements. They included horse racing, equestrian sport, wrestling, bodybuilding and volleyball. Also giving evidence was Des Rivadan, who is an employee of SASCOC. The media was not allowed to record her evidence regarding sexual allegations against former CEO Tabi Reddy. Lebantube, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And so it is, of course, that we ask you, do you think that the SASCOC inquiry will reveal the truth in all the goings-on at the National Sports Governing Body? Your comments have been coming through thick and fast. Let's share with some of our viewers. Tormented Glover says, what's the real purpose of this so-called SASCOC inquiry? Well, it's to waste money. get the truth and we're done, we forget. What happened to laying criminal charges and investigating and prosecuting the wrongdoers? Yes, Parliament has had enough of it all. And Michael Bigham's toilet says, I'm just sick and tired of all these inquiries and commissions, because at the end of the day, when it's over, the truth comes out. No one does jail time. It's a waste of time, resources, and this expenditure, because we must get a judge to chair this whole thing. And it brings in KPMG, Steinhoff, Life Dimeni, and Sasa. Now, Cricket South Africa has noted and is aware of the circulation of a video that has Imran Tahir on social media and WhatsApp groups. Imran Tahir was verbally and racially abused by an unknown man during the 4th one-day international against India at the Bidvest Wanderers Stadium on Saturday. Tahir reported the incident to stadium security and was subsequently accompanied by 2 security personnel to identify and to have the man ejected from the stadium. Tahir made no physical contact with the offender or any of the children in the vicinity. The incident is under investigation with the CSA and stadium security teams. Now, Proteas all-rounder Andile Pehlukwayo is optimistic that the Proteas will put on a much better performance when they take on India in the 5th ODI starting at St. George's Park later today. Pehlukwayo made a blistering 23 runs during the 4th ODI at the Wanderers to help his team to a 5-wicket victory. Pehlukwayo says his teammates are still confident that the ODI series can be shared if they can rectify the mistakes they made in the first 3 matches.
The Proteas have a good record here at St. George's Park, winning their last 2 ODIs against Australia in 2016 as well as against Sri Lanka last year. Their 5-wicket win at the Wanderers has been a major booster in the changing rooms. But conditions will be different this time around as the pitch favours spinners such as JP Dumini and Imran Tahir. The visitors also have explosive spinners that can demolish any batting lineup. This will be the first ODI to be played by the Proteas under the new lights here.
But you also want a pitch that is going to have a fair contest between bat and ball. So, yeah, hopefully we will have some runs, but I'm sure the Indian spinners are going to play a part in it. But also, don't forget, we've also got world-class spinners as well in Shamsi and Tahir.
The Indians still lead the series 3-1, with the remaining matches to be played at St. George's and Spaso Park on Friday. The Proteas need to win, and India would like to seal the series.
The team has been really positive. We've obviously been training really hard. We have a good momentum now from this game, from the last game we just played. I think we weren't really far away from a victory because the guys are really working really hard in the nets. We've been very specific about our trainings, and we've been in a good space, and the team environment's really good.
Cricket South Africa has also condemned unruly behaviour on match days. Imran Tahir has been verbally and racially abused by an unknown man during the 4th ODI at the Wanderers. Team management have confirmed Tahir followed all the right channels after the incident.
He was racially and verbally abused by a certain gentleman throughout the match, and he reported to the stadium security who were stationed in front of the change room, of the dressing room, and 2 gentlemen two of the security personnel accompanied him to identify the perpetrator. But obviously when he got up there, there were some hostile verbal exchanges, and to neutralize the situation, they removed him from the scene and brought him back to the change room. So that's what we've been told. I mean, there was definitely no exchanges and no children involved in the incident, as has been reported on social media.
The game will start at 1 tomorrow afternoon. Zolani Moya, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
And that's where we leave it with the sport. But in breaking news at this hour, the ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, and Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte are now at President Jacob Zuma's official residence in Pretoria, where they're delivering a formal letter of recall from the governing party. This comes soon after the ANC postponed its media briefing on the matter from noon until 2 o'clock this afternoon. The party said to inform its structures of the NEC's decision and to send the president a formal letter of recall. The briefing follows the marathon meeting held by the party's National Executive Committee in Irene outside Pretoria last night, where the NEC decided to call for a motion of no confidence in Zuma if he persists in refusing to accept his recall. Now time for the weather with Azwitagazi Tuwane.
Thank
Thanks very much and warm welcome. Let's take a look at your weather. On our satellite image, we're still seeing lots of moisture coming in from the tropical regions, some of it finding its way over the Western Cape to some parts of Northern Cape. Still expecting a lot of development over the interior South Africa going to the afternoon, and over Zambia, a storm currently happening over the interior stretching to Zimbabwe, and over Madagascar, over the far northern parts, we have a storm currently. We're still expecting isolated thunder showers over most parts of South Africa and severe thunderstorms over the northern parts of Angola, otherwise isolated to scattered. And over the southern parts of Mozambique, we have something heavy happening over the southern parts. Over South Africa, isolated to scattered, so please do have your umbrella with. Tomorrow, we're still expecting similar conditions, showers over most parts of South Africa going to SADC, but over the interior of Angola going to Zambia, we have up to 80% chance of thunder showers. Your temperatures expected to be at a maximum of 27 in Johannesburg. Afternoon thunder showers going to the evening expected. Temperatures will drop to 20 degrees in the evening. 28 is your maximum in Bloemfontein and 25 for Port Elizabeth. Cape Town, a maximum of 36 for today. If you are in the northern parts, Polokwane, just partly cloudy skies. In Port Elizabeth, currently, we're seeing partly cloudy skies to mostly cloudy skies, and we're still expecting isolated thunder showers going from the morning into the afternoon. In the evening, that will dissipate, and it will be cloudy. Temperatures will drop to 23. Windhoek, a maximum of 30, 34 for Gaborone. Isolated to scattered in Zimbabwe, Maputo 29 and just partly cloudy skies, Mahajanga 29, 30 to 60% chance of thunder showers over the eastern parts. We're still expecting isolated over most parts, Lusaka at a maximum of 30 and 27 for Nairobi, Kigali 26 and drizzle is expected. Yaoundé sitting at 31, 37 for Bangui, Pontonoa, maximum of 30 with 30% chance going to 60 of showers to thunder showers expected. It will be clear over the Sahara Desert, isolated showers just along the coastal regions, the northern and the southern parts for today going to tomorrow and tonight. We're still seeing clear skies over most parts of the Sahara Desert. Your temperatures in these regions still expected to be very hot in Khartoum at a maximum of 42 and 39 for Juba. Sana'a, a maximum of 27 degrees along the coastal regions. Cold temperatures in Tehran at a maximum of 13, 16 for Damascus. Riyadh, a maximum of 36. Dubai, you are at 33 degrees. Over the northern parts, again, along the coastal regions, Algiers at 14 and 12 for Tunis, 17 for Tripoli, Las Palmas, mostly cloudy skies with a maximum of 18 degrees, 35 for Bamako. Monrovia, Abidjan, 30% chance of showers expected for today, and temperatures sitting at 30 as well. 36 will be your maximum in Niamey, clear skies over the interior, and Jamina at a maximum of 37. That is all. Dayandu.
News at 9. We go beyond the headlines of the day's breaking news to bring you all the angles and in-depth analysis of stories. We go beyond the surface, including on how it will impact your life. Join us every day at 9 to zoom in on the day's big stories.
Technology is used for both positive and negative.
Some governments block the internet in times of protest.
With this internet blackout, it's impossible for me to do it, so I have to travel to Douala.
This act is a true violation of the rights of citizens.
In Africa, people are always coming up with innovative ways to use technology to solve some of their problems.
The more interesting piece of technology is actually the artificial intelligence.
AI, it's utilizing data to make your life easier.
On Network, we'll give you Africa's technology and social media news.
For all your technology news, join Siphumelele Zondi every Saturday at 17:30.
Welcome to Media Monitor, the show that analyzes the big news stories that made headlines. We bring you robust discussions on stories that made headlines in the week, where we interact with media analysts to unpack these top stories. Join me every Sunday morning from 9 to 10 Central African Time as I bring you riveting news and analysis.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Breaking news this hour, the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule and Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte are now at President Jacob Zuma's official residence in Pretoria, where they are delivering a formal letter of recall from the governing party. Meanwhile, the EFF's motion of no confidence is in the spotlight today as National Assembly Speaker Mbeki faces a deadline to bring it forward or face court action. The High Court in Cape Town is expected to hear an urgent application by City Mayor Patricia de Lilles this morning in relation to the vote of no confidence against her.
It's never done and out. We always want looking to fight back.
Now that the Proteas have averted a series whitewash in their ODI rumble against India, their next mission is to draw the series starting today.
Hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees. We're coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. Lots coming up between now and 12 p.m. Of course, breaking news there also is expected to feature around the ANC government transition, your views as well as news from the international and African continent. I'm not alone. Marumo, or rather Kendall Makamate, is joining us to give us our sporting highlights. Very good morning to you. Of course, I missed you yesterday, Kendall, and that's why I'm calling you Marumo.
And that's okay. That's okay. I don't mind being called Marumo. He is a great friend of mine. But you know what? It's not just President Zuma that's also facing a day of reckoning. It's also the Proteas. And we all know that we're all expecting the Proteas to come up with the goods once again when they face off against India in their 5th ODI.
The lead story at this hour, the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule and Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte are at President Jacob Zuma's official residence in Pretoria to deliver a formal of recall from the governing party, a formal letter that is. Meanwhile, the ANC has postponed its media briefing on the matter from noon until 2 o'clock this afternoon. The party says the reason is to inform its structures of the NEC's decision and to send the president a formal letter of recall. The briefing follows the marathon meeting held by the party's National Executive Committee in Irene outside Pretoria last night, where the NEC decided to call for a motion of no confidence in Zuma if he persists in refusing to accept his call. Indeed, once again, that breaking news this hour, the ANC's Secretary General Ace Magashule and Deputy SG Jesse Duarte are now at President Jacob Zuma's official residence in Pretoria, where they are set to be delivering a formal letter of recall from the governing party. Well, this comes soon after the ANC postponed its media briefing on the matter from noon until 2 o'clock this afternoon. The briefing follows the marathon meeting that was held by the party's NEC in Irene outside Pretoria last night, well into the early hours of the morning. The NEC has decided to call for a motion of no confidence in Zuma if he persists in refusing to accept his recall. Well, speculation is rife that the ANC is under pressure to take a swift decision on President Zuma's future before a motion of no confidence is passed against him. The motion's currently set down for the 22nd of February. The EFF has threatened that if they don't receive a satisfactory reply from the National Assembly Speaker Mbeki by 10 o'clock this morning, they will approach the High Court to compel her to reschedule the motion. Of course, so we do have Thabo for SABC. He is on the line to give us more information around the matter and on that formal letter that is set to be given to President Jacob Zuma. Very good morning to you, Thabo. What details can you give us around the attendance of both SG Ace Magashule as well as Deputy SG Jesse Duarte and their presence in Pretoria this morning?
Thank you very much. What we can confirm is that, yes, indeed, the motorcade bearing the Free State number plates, that of Premier of the Free State, also the Secretary General of ANC, Ace Magashule, has made its way into the Bryanterian estate. This is an estate where Mahlambandu is the official residence of the president. There's lots of security. There's tight security. We can't even go closer to Mahlambandu. As you know, that is one of the national key points, high security area. there's a high level of security around the precincts of Brantirion Estate, as you are well aware of the development that have been happening overnight, even early this morning. So basically, according to the ANC, the reason for them to postpone the press conference, which was scheduled initially for 12 o'clock for 2 p.m., was to follow their communications protocol. This means that there's a lot of backroom dealing happening. As you know, this is a very sensitive matter affecting a sitting head of state. And as we are well aware, the ANC doesn't have the constitutional mandate to recall a sitting head of state. And we've heard from initial reports that the President Zuma was basically not accepting any of their offers. So I think they are still trying to buy more time. And again, you know, in terms of the developments like this, the issue of security is very key for the state. So we've been told in good authority that also engagement behind the scenes with top military chiefs and security officials have to be kept abreast by the ruling party, especially Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, about what is happening, because obviously this is a delicate matter that needs to be treated very delicately. So we're waiting in bated breath to know what is going to be the response from within Mhlambandlo. We are not expecting any comments from Mr. Magashule when he gets out of here, heading back to the house, but clarity will be made when the press conference is hosted at 2 p.m. at the party's head office.
Definitely. And what would the process be from here on out?
There's lots of options that are left. If the president has succeeded to be recalled, we will hear from the union buildings the statement made, as in the case of former President Thabo Mbeki. That was done through government protocols. It has to be a statement read out to the nation. But if it is not like that, the party has to really go the other route. If the president doesn't agree, it's a parliamentary process. They have to brief their caucus in parliament and convey the message. That means, again, another flurry of activities. They have to go in Cape Town overnight, maybe, to go and convene another parliamentary caucus and discuss the way forward. But we'll hear the clarity from the press conference. I can't confirm anything at the moment, but the last option between the two is that of impeachment of the sitting president, and it has very dire consequences. So it's all speculation for now. We will definitely get the final answer this afternoon.
Indeed. Thank you very much for an update there. Tsepo Ikaneng for SABC, of course, presidential correspondent, giving us those details of the breaking news just coming in there of Ace Magashule, the ANC Secretary General, as well as Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte, making their way around the presidential place in Pretoria, officially delivering that recall letter. We will be giving you more information as and when it comes on that matter. Moving on, yesterday, opposition parties said that Parliament should be dissolved even if President Jacob Zuma steps down. The political parties met to plan a way forward on President Zuma's motion of no confidence, which was scheduled for next week.
Say, with all the people who were there in Parliament, who violated their oaths of office, as the majority of the Parliament has done, and has been found against by the Speaker, that we must proceed and say, amongst that majority, we must just simply elect a new president.
Once we remove Zuma, Parliament must be dissolved, because the Constitutional Court made a ruling that Parliament failed to discharge its responsibility when it couldn't protect the public protector, including holding the president accountable.
If the ANC comes back to Parliament, we will no longer allow them to act or allow anybody else to act outside the framework of the Constitution of our country, and we intend this present Parliament to be replaced.
The ruling party, the ANC, seeing that the damage has been done after they have almost took 9 years to defend Zuma, all of a sudden they say Zuma must go, and they don't even know for what reason. They can't share the reasons why he must go.
So it's a question of the motion of no confidence in the president, and then afterwards a resolution to dissolve the House.
We are saying because the problem is not just the president, Jacob Zuma, but is the ANC. It is important that Parliament be dissolved and we start from scratch.
Well, Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lilles is challenging the city's council speaker in the Western Cape High Court today. The speaker has scheduled a motion of no confidence brought by the DA in de Lilles for Thursday. De Lilles wants the court to order the council to allow the use of a secret ballot when voting takes place. Let's go live to court proceedings. Unfortunately, we will be giving you those proceedings live as and when they do come in. For now, though, let's have a look at our question of the day. We're asking you, what do you expect from the ANC's midday press? Of course, now that has changed. We've just gotten word just a couple of moments ago that that midday presser has now been moved to 2 p.m. this afternoon. And we've also just confirmed the attendance of ANC's SG Ace Magashule as well as Deputy SG Jesse Duarte, and of course they're making their way to the presidential place in Pretoria to deliver a formal recall letter. Of course, this is what we have been asking you. We'll have a look at your tweets after the break.
Show me a greater power on the whole continent of Africa. Show me a greater power anywhere.
6th of June 1918 was the establishment of our movement to maintain that
we need to do something about the educational upliftment of the Afrikaner, and we also need to do something about the economic upliftment of the Afrikaner. And that was the two main goals at that stage in 1918.
The Broederbond never was a cultural organization. It was a state-capturing organization. It is, in fact...
I like that term.
It has captured the financial systems. It has captured the parastatals. It has captured cultural organizations.
For all your constitutional and legal matters, tune into Rights and Recourse on Sundays between 2 and 3 Central African Time.
Welcome back. Well, for more on the breaking news around what is happening in Pretoria, we are joined by SABC's Offense Stilo, who is giving us the updates from just outside the presidential guest house in Pretoria. A very good morning to you, Offense. What is the latest on the ground?
Well, it's quite funny that President Jacob Zuma's closest allies within the ANC NEC are the ones that have been tasked with the unenviable job of actually coming to deliver the news of the outcome of yesterday's NEC meeting. We understand that the meeting actually took place for about 13 hours, and within that, the ANC Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa paid the President, Mr. Jacob Zuma, a courtesy visit to tell him the outcome of that particular meeting. But today it's an official handover of the outcome of the meeting in the form of some sort of a document that will be handed over to President Jacob Zuma to sort of tell him that apparently the outcome was that he only has 48 hours for him to actually resign. There are some unconfirmed reports that he's actually told them that they will have to recall him and he will not be standing down. But quite interestingly enough, both the Secretariat of the ANC, Jesse Duarte and Ace Magashule, have actually gone through the road that actually leads to Mahlamba Ndlovu, which is the official presidential guest house here in Pretoria.
Now, we do know that there seems to be a state of frenzy, specifically on social media. What is the mood like on the ground? And take us through the mood of what you've seen and actually seeing those the motorcade make its way through to the presidential guest house.
Well, there's certainly, since last night, there's been a hive of activity here in Pretoria, since I mentioned that, Cyril Ramaphosa actually came to pay President Jacob Zuma a visit last night. He spent around 30 minutes with the president, actually deliberating on some of the outcomes of the meeting, which was still underway when he actually came to visit here. So there's definitely some sort of an expectation of some sort as to whether the president will actually resign or he will resist some of the pressure from the NEC to actually step down. But there is some air of expectation that something worth writing home about will definitely transpire in the not so distant future. Yes.
Thank you very much for giving us the update there. Francis Sitima on the ground for SABC News. We will be keeping you updated on what is taking place around the presidential guest house in Pretoria. For now, though, let's actually have a look at President Jacob Zuma's profile.
A son from the rural lands of Nkandla in KwaZulu-Natal, a head boy with no formal education.
Ngale nkathi ngangathi kuhlala isikhashana khona ngihambe ngongonini kubande kuseni kodwa ukungabibikho kababa kanye futhi nokuthi ubaba mkhulu waba nenkinga ngoba wayefile engenamuntu okumbhekela inkomo ngoba naye wayesebenza futhi eyiphoyisa kwaphoqele ukuthi ngale nkathi ngabe ngesikoleni kufanele ngibheke inkomo zakhe. I
did not even have an opportunity to go to school. Really? Yeah. Precisely because of that, in one sense.
Despite those adversaries, he would rise to become the first citizen.
I, Jacob Zuma, swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, observe, uphold, and maintain the Constitution and all other law of the Republic. And I solemnly and sincerely promise that I will always promote all that will advance the Republic and oppose all that may harm it.
But reaching the highest office in the land was filled with battles. So was the quest to finish his second term in office. It's almost a case of déjà vu. Jacob Zuma's second term as Deputy President of the Republic was cut short by President Thabo Mbeki.
However, as President of the Republic, I've come to the conclusion that the circumstances dictate that in the interest of the Honorable Deputy President, the government, our young democratic system and our country, it would be best to release Honorable Jacob Zuma from his responsibilities as Deputy President of the Republic and member of the Cabinet. Necessarily, we will continue to monitor and respond to all developments in relation to this and other relevant legal processes.
The decision follows a Durban High Court corruption judgment against Zuma's former financial advisor, Schabir Shaik. But 2 years later, Zuma rose again in Polokwane, beating Mbeki to become the 12th president of the ANC.
By Comrade Jacob Zuma, 2,329.
It was the National Executive Zuma-led that would recall Mbeki from presidency. The NPA's decision to drop the corrupt charges against Zuma would pave way for him to ascend and become the third democratically elected president of South Africa.
Let's raise your right hand, Mr. President, and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Praise for his policy on HIV and AIDS, and the reconfiguration of cabinet, which some critiqued as too bloated. It's also under Zuma that the ANC's membership grew to over 1 million. But at the same time, its electoral support dropped, paving the way for his former praise singers to try to make his second term unbearable. The Nkandlamani, that is, the public protector, found his family unduly benefited from 246 million upgrade of the Zuma homestead, and the Constitutional Court found President Zuma broke his oath of office.
State resources belong to the public, as does state power. The repositories of these resources and power are to use them on behalf and for the benefit of the public.
This while Zuma fends off allegations of improper links to the Gupta family, which have led to state capture. The public protector wants Judicial Commission of Inquiry, but the remedial action is that the Chief Justice appoints the judge.
Final analysis, the President's overall conduct leaves one with no option to find that he must be held personally liable for all the costs that were occasioned from 14 October 2016, when Fori stated that the previous public protector had finalized the investigation and signed the report. The President compounded matters when he persisted with the litigation based on a supposed typing error, after initially conceding that the report be released if indeed the public protector had finalized the investigation and signed the report. In the circumstances, the following order is granted. The President is ordered to personally pay the costs referred to in paragraph 3 of the order made by this court on 1 November 2016, to the extent that such costs were incurred after 14 October 2016.
I agree.
I agree.
I therefore hand down judgment.
At the same time, public outcry that President Zuma resigns.
I will never, on my own, resign.
He's always made it clear, only the ANC can remove him.
Let's take a look at President Jacob Zuma's presidency, both domestically and internationally, from a policy point of view.
On a cloudy, rainless day in Pretoria on May 9, 2009, Jacob Zuma, a former head boy, political prisoner, freedom fighter, and intelligence specialist, was finally inaugurated as the country's third democratically elected president. After a bruising fight for the ANC presidency, Zuma was a man who understood political chess.
In the presence of everyone assembled here, and in full realization of the high calling I assume as President of the Republic of South Africa.
It was the beginning of a long, winding journey that would last almost 9 years. And Zuma wanted his own stamp of authority, his own legacy. He moved his first pawn forward. The country had been battling a high number of deaths due to AIDS-related illnesses. Zuma's AIDS programs were met with resounding applause, particularly from AIDS activists. His policy would see the major rollout of treatment nationwide. Life expectancy increased from 56 to 63.
I felt it necessary that I should give this leadership and take the test today so that all of us in the country should begin to take the test.
And the new head of state placed a high premium on education. He started by introducing a basic education and higher education ministry.
The Department of Education will be split into separate ministries, one for basic education and the other for higher education and training.
Not only did he announce free tertiary education for the poor, under his watch, 2 new universities were built. The University of Mpumalanga and Sol Plaatje University in Northern Cape meant that all provinces had higher learning institutions. Under his watch, the National Development Plan was adopted, a blueprint to addressing the country's economic challenges. And the country abolished load shedding, with more other players and more units coming online at Medupi and Kusilo power stations. He also appointed former public protector Thulima Donsela and Chief Justice Mocheng Mocheng.
The only matters that are excluded from the mandate of the public protector are court decisions and matters outside the public sector.
And as in a chess, some pieces would just have to be shared. He undertook his first cabinet reshuffle in 2010. Several more followed during his 2 terms in office, as more pieces on the board needed to be shelved.
I've decided to make changes to the national executive in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness.
As the country sought to rebrand itself, new banknotes featuring Madiba's face were unveiled. When the president came to power, the globe had just been hit by a massive economic meltdown. In an effort to mitigate the situation, the multi-billion rand infrastructure rollout program was announced. This saw thousands of jobs being created, though the economy shed close to 1 million jobs. Even promises of 1 million job opportunities did not materialize as the economy struggled to recover.
So help me God.
In 2014, President Zuma was sworn in for a second term. The party had been returned to power by 62% of the vote, a decline from 66% in his first term. In his drive to seek new economic opportunities, President Zuma also spearheaded Operation Phakisa. The focus was on the ocean's economy. This has unlocked thousands of potential job opportunities along the country's vast coastline.
Since the inception of Operation Phakisa, ocean's economy, over 4,500 jobs have been created in the various sectors.
South Africa in 2010 successfully hosted the Soccer World Cup. However, upgrades to the road infrastructure, which led to the e-tolls, have been largely rejected by Gauteng motorists. The Black Industrialist Program is another project which has sought to get black entrepreneurs involved in the economy of the country. Having assumed office in May 2009, his first foreign assignment was a 3-nation tour where he attended the AU summit in Sirte, Libya, before proceeding to L'Aquila, Italy for a then G8 summit and then a gathering in Egypt. At the G8, he met US President Barack Obama for the first time. While many predicted that Zuma would spend more time on domestic issues, he was also frequently on the world stage. He was instrumental in getting South Africa to join the major growing economic bloc, BRIC, which comprised of Brazil, Russia, India and China. Upon South Africa joining it, it was renamed BRICS. South Africa championed the formation of the BRICS Bank, which is a regional office in South Africa.
We welcome the decision to prepare a new BRICS-led development bank for inclusive and sustainable development projects. Such a bank has great potential to help us create good jobs in developing countries.
Across the border, he continued efforts to stabilize the troubled situation in Zimbabwe. In the region, Lesotho also became a source of concern following the coup attempt, and a special envoy in the form of Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa was deployed. His efforts went beyond SADC, with South Africa taking a keen interest in the continent's youngest country, South Sudan. There were ongoing efforts to stabilize the DRC. In the United Nations, he called for change to the Security Council, urging African countries to be admitted to that body.
As a country that voluntarily dismantled its nuclear weapons program, South Africa is of the firm view that there are no safe hands for weapons of mass destruction.
South Africa's attempts at resolving the Libyan question saw it support the resolution that eventually led to the ousting and killing of Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi, a source of great regret for the administration. South Africa also headed various continental bodies during President Zuma's tenure, including the chairmanship of African Union and the regional body SADC. The conflict resolution in various parts of the continent continued, perhaps an affirmation of South Africa's stature in the continent and beyond. Zuma will be remembered for many reasons, good and bad, but no one will doubt his leadership in bringing peace to Burundi and brokering peace in the once politically volatile KZN. Mzwandile Mbeki, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, indeed, we will be giving you more updates around that formal letter that has been delivered to President Jacob Zuma's guest house, presidential guest house in Pretoria, that is, from ANC's Secretary General Ace Magashule, as well as the ANC's Deputy SG, Jesse Duarte. Do stay tuned to SABC Newsroom for more live updates on this. For now, though, let's take a short break.
South Africa is in need of a frank dialogue about the state of our nation. My name is Omkhopotse JJ Tabane. Join me on Frankly Speaking every Sunday at 8:30. Come now, let's talk frankly.
Welcome back. Well, the Bank of Baroda says it's committed to supporting its customers and employees following its decision to exit the local market. Yesterday, the South African Reserve Bank confirmed that the Bank of Baroda notified the Registrar of Banks of its exit. The Indian Bank was the last remaining institution to continue doing business with the Gupta family, through which its companies allegedly laundered money.
The Bank of Baroda was the last remaining bank to continue doing business with the Gupta family after the big four banks cut ties with them. The bank reported 45 suspicious transactions by Gupta-owned companies amounting to 4.2 billion rand to the Financial Intelligence Center between September 2016 and July 2017. Last year, the FIC fined the Bank of Baroda 1 million rand for flaunting anti-corruption laws. Analysts say the bank's association with the Gupta family has done a heavy blow to its image.
I think it's a case of their association with the Gupta family has kind of tainted their name in South Africa. The Bank of Baroda is a very large company. It's much larger than you would think based just on South African operations. It's the second largest bank in India in terms of assets. We're talking about in excess of $100 billion, which is pretty significant even in the US or in the developed world. And it has operations in many countries around the world, Australia, Mauritius, I think about 20-something countries around the world there's offices.
The Bank of Baroda has a market capitalization of 80 billion rand.
They were a very, very small player in South Africa. We have a very large, very stable banking sector. And it's not like they're saying they're leaving South Africa because of the difficulty of the South African business environment or anything wrong with South Africa. It's more a case of that they're leaving South Africa because of mistakes that their people have made in South Africa in terms of some of their associations, etc., and some of their business decisions.
The Bank of Baroda, which is expected to close shop by the end of March, says it will not be taking any deposits from the beginning of March. But analysts say the bank, which operates in 24 other countries, is not off the hook yet and might face criminal charges if they are implicated in the looming state capture investigation. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
For more on this story, we are now joined from our Durban studio by the managing partner of the Amabugane Center for Investigative Journalism, Mr. Sam Sol. Very good morning to you, Sam. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Firstly, a joint investigation of thousands of court documents, bank records, SARB records, internal Gupta company correspondence and interviews with Abugane revealed that a laundry list of potential violations and disregard for banking ethics by the Bank of Baroda executives. What essentially are the violations that have been brought forward?
Look, I think in banking there's something known as a politically exposed person, and the documents show that Bank of Baroda was well aware that the people it was dealing with were politically exposed persons, and despite that they went ahead with a number of very risky and questionable transactions. And some of the records that we've looked at really suggest that they knowingly involved themselves in money laundering on behalf of the Guptas. So I think the news that they are pulling out of South Africa is bad news in the sense that I think maybe this is motivated by an attempt to move themselves beyond the jurisdiction of the Commission of Inquiry, because I think they have a lot more questions to answer, and they're a lot more at risk than perhaps the Indian public, for instance, is aware of.
And in terms of the exit of the bank, what does the exit of the Bank of Baroda actually mean for the Gupta-owned companies and, of course, the hundreds of employees that they employ?
Look, the companies can't operate without banking services. It's very, very difficult. And the bank wanted to withdraw banking services. It's the last bank that offers these services to Gupta companies here. The Guptas went to court to prevent that happening. But if the bank withdraws completely, obviously, by default, the Gupta family and their businesses are going to have to find new outlets. Many of those companies have been sold, supposedly, to new buyers, but there's a lot of question marks about whether those are actually legitimate or genuine transactions and not, in a sense, fake transactions to get around the concerns over Gupta ownership.
And what is the involvement of the Bank of Baroda in state capture per se?
Look, I think what we've looked at is the facilitation of the movement of money. There are several techniques that money launderers use to disguise the origin and the destination of money, to move money across borders. And in the case of the Gupta accounts with Bank of Baroda, not only here, but also in Dubai and elsewhere, we have seen many of those features. There's a particular technique that is used where money is placed on a fixed deposit, and then a loan is made against that fixed deposit, as using the fixed deposit as collateral for the loan. And in that way, money can be placed on a fixed deposit in Dubai, and then a loan paid out in South Africa based on the security provided in Dubai. And unless you know a connection between the company in Dubai and the company here in South Africa, you don't know that that's essentially the money being laundered across borders. And we've seen a number of examples in the Gupta accounts, in the Gupta leaks, which suggest that is happening, involving Bank of Baroda accounts, where there may be other explanations, more innocent explanations, but it certainly looks like money laundering to us.
Now, the Bank of Baroda stood by the Guptas as 4 of South Africa's other major banks had shut their bank accounts back in 2016 on the grounds that anti-money laundering laws made it too risky to actually do business with the family at the time. Did the bank not possibly see any red flags?
Look, that's the big question. You know, we know, and it was one of the reports that you quoted, that in 2010, the bank was involved in providing a home loan for the wife of President Zuma, Mrs. Bongi Ngema Zuma, and that the bank also knew that the repayments on that loan were being made by a private company connected to the Guptas, rather than by Mrs. Ngema Zuma herself. So you had a situation back in 2010 where a private company was servicing the home loan of the president's wife. And, you know, so there were many red flags that they should have been aware of. At the time when other banks were closing their accounts, they were opening new accounts for the Gupta family or the Gupta group of companies. We've also seen and reported from the Gupta leaks that senior banking officers from their South African operation were provided with favors by the Gupta family in terms of getting work permits, in terms of arranging study opportunities for their children, that kind of thing. So there's evidence that banking staff themselves laid themselves open to conflicts of interest in relation to the Gupta family and their businesses.
Now, according to Abu Bungane's investigations, did the Bank of Baroda's executives actually sought personal favors from the Guptas?
Yes, that's correct. As I've just mentioned, you know, they were having trouble. One of the individuals was having trouble renewing his work permit here. He routed a request, according to the Gupta Leaks emails we've seen, through to a Gupta family member or their one of their main officials, who in turn contacted a senior Home Affairs official and you know, had the problem sorted out. There's evidence that one of the bank officials enjoyed hotel hospitality, which was paid for by the Guptas. As I say, another bank official's son requested that an internship with a company here in South Africa be arranged for his son, which was done by the Guptas. So, you know, all sorts of behavior which would not encourage, you know, would not be seen as a good thing for a bank manager who's supposed to exercise oversight over a client to enter into those sorts of relationships.
Now, apart from the Gupta companies, who else actually banks with Baroda, and were any of those other companies also reported, or were there any other red flags regarding any other companies that are banking with Baroda?
Look, obviously a number of companies that were related in this whole state capture story, this state capture picture, also made use of Bank of Baroda accounts. One thinks, for instance, of Trillion, the asset management company, and Gupta-related companies seem to have really been, you know, the major clients of Bank of Baroda in South Africa. They did have other clients, but it seems like they were in a major way exposed to Gupta-related companies more than any other entity.
Thank you very much. That was a managing partner from Amabugane Center for Investigative Journalism, Sam Sol, of course, on the exiting of Baroda Bank here in South Africa. Of course, all your sporting highlights coming up. But first up, let's take a short break.
A warm welcome to one of your favorite weekly review analysis programs, Media Monitor. So let's look at the race itself.
It's just becoming a personality contest where people just want somebody to guard their own vested interest. And I feel that the country is at a point now where we need some sort of change.
It is ANC policy that they will have to implement.
We fairly know the direction the ANC wants to take. As a leader, you have to implement.
So what was it like on the ground in Kenya?
Well, the country is divided. The country is very divided.
I think within the country, for me, the one person that I criticize severely, and I'm not very happy with his approach, is Raila Odinga, with him pulling out.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Thank you very much for having stayed with us. You're watching Newsroom. My name is Kendall Makhamate. Now, South African all-rounder Andile Phehlukwayo says early Indian wickets will be the key for the Proteas as they attempt to stay alive in the series when the two sides contest the fifth ODI at St. George's Park this afternoon. Phehlukwayo says the team has a strategy to effect early dismissals in an attempt to have a go at the Indian middle order. The strapping left-hander also insisted that the mood in the camp had lifted, and at 3-1 down, they are determined to take the series to the last match.
So we know how to go about the game. We train really specific. The guys know their game plans, their individual game plans, what you need to do. And once again, I think the most important thing when you're batting is probably watch the ball. So if you can do that and try to execute your game plan, that's all you can do. It'll be really nice for us to expose their middle order, and hopefully we can see what they can do. But at the same time, we don't want to really look too forward. You still want to focus on the small things that you need to do, execute your skills, and worry about one ball at a time. We're looking to be very positive, move forward, move good positions, try to pick the ball, and watch the ball and play really straight.
Now, Cricket South Africa has noted and is aware of the circulation of video footage featuring Imran Tahir on social media and WhatsApp groups. Imran Tahir was verbally and racially abused by an unknown man during a fourth one-day international against India at the Bidvis Wanderers Stadium on Saturday. Tahir reported the incident to stadium security and was subsequently accompanied by 2 security personnel to identify and to have the man ejected from the stadium. Tahir made no physical contact with the offender or any of the children in the vicinity. The incident is under investigation with the CSA and stadium security teams. In the meantime, Cricket South Africa has launched their Coca-Cola Schools T20 Challenge in Johannesburg this morning. The competition is considered the breeding ground for up-and-coming talent in South Africa, and CSA is looking to cast that net even wider this season and to continue their focus on transformation.
The new generation of Protea superstars, Kagiso Rabada, Andile Phehlukwayo, Lungi Ngidi, Quinton de Kock and captain Aiden Markram all started their international journeys at the T20 Schools Challenge. For CSA, it's a crucial part of the pipeline that services South Africa's national teams with the cream of the cricketing crop. And the governing body, which is adamant about enforcing their transformation policies, is sticking to their guns this season.
We have approached schools at the start of the season and said to them, listen, this is the target. The target is 2 black players on the field at all times. and 4 at the finals weekend. But if you cannot comply at this stage, at least tell us and give us a plan of exactly how you're going to progress and going to change the future, so that in the future you don't have the same issues. So those schools that have complied, no issue. Those schools that have not complied had to submit plans like that, and those schools that unfortunately they couldn't submit plans could not compete.
In an attempt to cast the net further and wider, Proteas batsman Themba Bavuma has been appointed tournament ambassador, and he will be on the lookout for outstanding young players to be a part of the Coca-Cola T20 All-Star team. This team will comprise of 12 players, 2 from each franchise final, and they will play in a curtain raiser against the CSA Development Hub team during the national finals.
We look for players that really encapsulate what us as Proteas we stand for. We know that talent is, everyone's got talent, you know, but it's really all the other mental aspects, you know, that we're looking for, the grit, the perseverance, resilience, you know, and those are the additional attributes that I feel that you need to have for you to get to, you know, the Protea level.
The 3-day national finals will take place at the University of Pretoria Cricket Oval from the 16th to the 18th of March. Samantha Mari, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, American teenager Chloe Kim blew away the rest of the field to win gold in the women's snowboard half-pipe at the Winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang, South Korea. Kim clinched first place with a near-perfect score of 98.25 on her final run. Meanwhile, a Japanese athlete was expelled after failing an out-of-competition doping test. This was the first doping case during the testing period of the Games.
Here's where we'd see the captain. Captain, she goes for it, gets it around.
Kim leads the world rankings and was the overwhelming favorite for the event. She led from start to finish and managed back-to-back 1080s on her final run to score a brilliant 98.25. Kim finished well clear of silver medalist China's Liu Jiayu and her compatriot Ariel Gold. Austrian Marcel Hirscher claimed gold in the men's alpine combined slalom. It was Hirscher's first Olympic gold. He's now only the 5th man to hold the Olympic and world titles in a combined event. The competition finally got underway after 2 days of weather postponements. The winds were still high on Tuesday, but organizers opted to go ahead. Fans are also wary of conditions.
They are professionals, but the worst thing is like they are on speeds of 120 k's per hour. When I ski, it's like maybe 40, 50 k's, and I would be already very in trouble with this wind.
I know there was some discussion about what was slope style yesterday, that was too windy, and I know they have postponed other events. Because if it's dangerous, you shouldn't compete at all, of course.
Meanwhile, the International Ski Federation has refuted claims that athletes' complaints were ignored in the build-up to Monday's women's snowboard slopestyle final. Several athletes had argued that the extreme wind and hard snow made conditions too dangerous to compete and said they had requested the event to be postponed. But organizers insisted that conditions were monitored very closely.
Because it's a smaller field, the athletes have much more direct contact with our directors. And again, it wasn't a protest that one team issued. They just went to our race director, Robbie, and just voiced their concerns about the wind conditions. So there was no formal protest.
Japanese short-track speed skater Kei Saito was sent back home on the day of his arrival in Pyeongchang. Saito was provisionally suspended after testing positive for a masking agent. Saito, however, denied any wrongdoing. A final ruling will be issued after the Games. Liesl Sankel, SABC News.
Too bad that, like sports and doping, is never too far away from the news, isn't it? Now, the SAB League Skills Camp is a project designed to upskill all those involved in football at the grassroots level. SAFA and SAB are trying to address the need to get more coaches, refs and officials up to speed in the ever-evolving football landscape. South African Under-20 head coach Thabo and Supersport Development SAB League National Championship winning coach Dumelo Ndaba spoke to SABC last night.
SAFA, together with SAB, has come with this great initiative of offering a SAFA D license course, a 5-day course conducted at the High Performance Center in Pretoria. just to upgrade the skills of our coaches.
Get the basics out of the way and move on then. Tumelo, tell us, we need to understand the scope of the SAB League structure. You went through it, you won with Gauteng. How big is this league and how important is it to the game?
You see, this SAB Under 21 league, it's a big league whereby it gives opportunities to young coming coaches, the referees and the administrators. And now, you know, the sports physio to give them experience to enhance their talent.
Yeah, and from your perspective, how did it help when you took Gauteng all the way to the top?
You know, it started when I was still in SAB team league in Western Kagiso. I was coaching Manzeville Stars, so my journey started there as a coach. So where I learned to become a coach, you know, like building up your character in terms of a coach, doing some courses from SAFA. So it helped me a lot in terms of building my career.
After a horrific accident, major questions were asked.
So step one, I asked myself, do I really want to die? And my answer to that was, I'm not sure. And then step two was, do I want my parents to bury me? And the answer to that was no.
Learning kept his brain in full action on how the brain works.
When I was in hospital, right, as I was saying, to catch up with my peers, I started to become obsessed with memory techniques and how the brain works and how we retain information.
Touching lives is his continuous mission.
I now work for a non-profit where we deal with access issues regarding kids with disabilities and persons with disability. We're busy working on beach access.
Being wheelchair-bound did not stop fun in his life.
I party in a wheelchair, I laugh in a wheelchair, I smile in a wheelchair.
For all your uplifting stories, catch Bupilong every Friday.
This is your midday report. Good afternoon.
I will be faithful.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Let's take a look at how African markets and currencies are performing now.
The central bankers say the success of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is just a bubble.
Breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Take your evening well informed with Primetime News.
Thanks for tuning in. You're watching SABC News Prime. The burning land reform issue was also a point of discussion on the first day.
If you do not have a skills revolution, you will run into the kind of problems that we're having at the moment.
We have funded about 466,000 students, out of about 800,000 students that are in the university system.
South Africa says insufficient electricity and water remains one of the biggest barriers to development and prosperity on the continent.
The top four batsmen in the squad, Hashim Amla, Quinton de Kock, Faf du Plessis and AB de Villiers, are certainties in the starting lineup.
I really believe we cover all bases when it comes to spin bowling, seam bowling, proper pace bowling and an amazing batting lineup.
Stay tuned every Monday to Sunday from 6 p.m.
The fossil hominid sites at Sterkfontein Caves, known as Cradle of Humankind, were declared a World Heritage Site on the 2nd of December 1999. The Cradle of Humankind covers an area of over 47,000 hectares of privately owned land northwest of Johannesburg. Most of the site is on dolomite, a rock type which is slightly soluble in water. There are currently over 200 caves on the site and 13 fossil sites. We know that Australopithecus africanus were present in the cradle from about 2 to 4 million years ago. It is generally known that hominids are close relatives of human ancestors.
South Africa is in need of a frank dialogue about the state of our nation. My name is Onkgopotse JJ Tabane. Join me on Frankly Speaking every Sunday at 8:30. Come now, let's talk frankly.
Breaking news at this hour, the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule and Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte are now at President Jacob Zuma's official residence in Pretoria, where they are delivering a formal letter of recall from the governing party. Meanwhile, the EFF's motion of no confidence is in the spotlight today as National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete faces a deadline to bring it forward or face court action. The High Court in Cape Town is expected to hear an urgent application by City Mayor Patricia de Lilles related to the vote of no confidence against her.
It's never done and out. We always want looking to fight back.
Now that the Proteas have averted a series whitewash in their ODI rumble against India, their next mission is to draw the series starting today.
Hello and welcome to the last hour of Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankee. So if you've just tuned in, we're coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. A lot coming up between now and 12 p.m, including the latest from that ANC government transition. Your views as well as more news from the African and international continent. Of course, joining me on your sports is Kendall Makmate. Very good morning to you, Kendall. You good?
Oh, fantastic, Shante. Great to see you, and tell you what, it's just 2 hours to go to the start of that 5th ODI, and a lot of people are looking forward to seeing how well the Proteas are going to do.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we'll be bringing you all this and a little more detail a little later.
Our lead story this hour, Jacob Zuma is a South African politician serving as the 4th and current president of South Africa since the 2009 general elections. He is currently in his 2nd 5-year term. Zuma served as deputy president of South Africa from 1999 to 2005 before he was dismissed by President Thabo Mbeki in 2005 after his financial advisor, Shabir Sheikh, was convicted of soliciting a bribe for Zuma. He was nonetheless elected president of the ANC on the 18th of December 2007 after defeating Mbeki at the ANC conference in Polokwane. SABC's parliamentary editor Vuyani Green joins us from Cape Town. A very good morning to you, Vuyani. Please give us a snapshot of President Jacob Zuma's parliamentary career.
Good morning, Shante, and good morning to our viewers at home. Yes, as you've rightly pointed out, that President Zuma was elected as the ANC president in 2007, and 2 years later he was elected as the president of the Republic of South Africa. After, he was sworn in as the president of the Republic after he was elected by the National Assembly with, I think, about 277 votes in the 400-strong National Assembly. His presidential term as the head of the state or president of the republic is expected to come to an end next year. It's a 10-year term which has been prescribed by the Constitution. But as we know that President Zuma's relationship with Parliament, especially National Assembly, has not been rosy. Soon after he was elected as the president, there was a motion of no confidence that was brought against him by the COPE leader, Reverend Mvume Dandala at the time. Unfortunately, that motion was defeated by members of the ANC. As you know that since 2007 until last year, President Zuma has been the president of the ANC, which means he enjoyed the political support of his party. That's why a number of motion of no confidence, especially by opposition parties, have been defeated, and he survived all those motions of no confidence. And his, a relationship with Parliament was made worse with the arrival of the EFF in Parliament. As you know that every time that the President was in Parliament, in the National Assembly, either to deliver a state of the nation address, that address will be disrupted by members of the EFF, resulting in some of those members being kicked out of the House. So the President has enjoyed frosty relationship, and sometimes very acrimonious relationship with the National Assembly.
Definitely. Vianney, I'm going to bring Mzwandile Mbeki, our presidential correspondent, in here. He's just going to give us a brief update as to what exactly is taking place on the ground in the atmosphere around the presidential guest house in Pretoria as we speak. Very good morning to Mzwandile. Of course, you have been following the updates throughout the course of these past couple of chaotic days. Take us through the developments and any other information that we have around the formal letter that has been handed to President Jacob Zuma, or at least his guest house.
Shante, as you can see, we are outside the presidential guest house. That's where Mahlangu Ndlovu is housed, so the official residence of President Jacob Zuma. So we know that the SGO's office, the Office of the Secretary General, so which includes Ace Makashule and the Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, were tasked with the responsibility of giving the letter to the President about the recall that was decided upon last night. So that has apparently since happened, because the Secretary General, Ace Makashule, we have seen him leaving the House, so which does indicate that perhaps they've done what they had been tasked by the NEC to do. But the Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, is still inside. And of course, you must remember, this is a very interesting situation. Events have moved quite fast. We remember that last night at about 11, the Deputy President and the SGO, rather the SG, came here to speak to President Jacob Zuma, because we had heard that he had been asked to resign within 48 hours, failing which a recall will be invoked. So it appears that perhaps the latter was the route that they took. So right now we're waiting for any movement that is happening. As you can see, I said we are outside the official residence. Perhaps if the president would want to, let's say, communicate whatever feeling or whatever message to the nation, we expect that perhaps we may have to move about a kilometer, which is at the Union Buildings, because that's where the seat of government is. So yeah, we will be monitoring the situation, and whatever update that comes, so we'll be able actually to then bring you up to speed. But for now, we're staying outside and waiting for any bits of information that we'll be getting. We've tried to speak to the presidency's office. For now, we've not been able to reach them, but I think as the time goes on, so we'll be able perhaps to find out what exactly is happening. So what is President Zuma thinking about this, what he wants to do, or how he wants to communicate with the nation. Because once his party has decided, and then he has to make some statements so that we know what exactly is happening. Shante.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Mzwandile, just outside the presidential guest house in Pretoria. Let's cross back to Vianney. Of course, Vianney, we actually heard there and got confirmation of ANC SG Ace Makashule, as well as Deputy General, Secretary General, that is Jesse Duarte, actually having to hand over that recall letter to President Jacob Zuma. And, you know, throughout the run-up of the end of last year's NEC elections, they seem to be on NDZ's side, and it seems that the same party that has had to groom him is now having to take him out of that position. Let's have a look at that journey. Mr. Green, can you hear me? Vianney, can you hear me?
Chantel, can you repeat your question?
Well, we're just getting confirmation word from Mzwandile Mbeki, of course, confirming the exit of Ace Magashule, ANC SG, in handing over that letter and leaving the presidential guest house in Pretoria. It seems as though the same ANC that has groomed him throughout these years is the same ANC that has had to recall him. Let's have a look at the process and the journey that this has been over the past couple of years.
Well, as I indicated, Chantel, that, last year in December, the President Zuma stepped down as the president of the ANC, which means he no longer enjoys political support of his party. In other words, he's no longer in charge of his own party. And, some analysts have even gone as far as saying that perhaps the president's political support, even among the members of parliament or the ANC caucus here in parliament, has diminished. That is yet to be seen, as we know that all the motions, as I indicated, all the motions of no confidence against the president, which were brought by opposition parties, have failed, and the president has survived all those motions because he had the backing of his caucus here in parliament. Now that he's no longer the leader, the president of the ANC, the jury is out whether, if there is this EFF motion of no confidence scheduled for next week, which the EFF wants it to be debated this week. If that motion is debated, will it be defeated by ANC members of parliament? Because all that they need, the EFF and opposition parties need, is 50+1 simple majority, and they don't have that 50+1. They need ANC members to vote with them in order to pass this motion. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's the president now seems to be in a weakened position politically, but we will see if, for instance, these methods to try and remove him from office are going to succeed, because there are two constitutionally prescribed ways of removing a president from office, and that's a vote of no confidence, which is provided for in section 102 of the Constitution, or the removal, the one that has been referred to as impeachment, which is in section 89 of the Constitution. But the quickest way is section 102, the vote of no confidence. That's the one that opposition parties are gunning for, and the problem is that the ANC doesn't want to, for instance, now that the president is being asked to resign, he has to resign himself in order to avoid being humiliated in parliament by opposition parties. But then the problem, the dilemma that the ANC is facing, it doesn't want its members to vote with the opposition in order to remove from office its former president. That's the dilemma that the ANC is facing at this stage, and that's why, in my view, they're trying to persuade the president to step down out of his own volition. Unfortunately, those are extra constitutional means. The party can just persuade the president to resign. If he doesn't want to, it's only up to the National Assembly to remove a president, because it's the National Assembly that elects a president. It's also the National Assembly that can remove a president from office in terms of the Constitution.
Let's have a look at some of the characteristics of President Jacob Zuma. He seems to be very defiant, and on many occasions before this, verbally and on record heard saying that he will not leave, he will not resign, unless, of course, the ANC asks him to resign or recall him. And now we're finding ourselves in the situation, and still yet we're seeing a very, very defiant President Jacob Zuma.
Well, at this stage, Chantel, whatever we can say, I think it's just speculative, because firstly, the ANC has not announced officially what is the decision of the NEC. All that we're hearing, are unconfirmed reports that the president has been given 48 hours to resign. Secondly, we haven't heard what the president is going to say. So anything now, it's in the realm of conjecture. Perhaps the president might decide to resign if it's true that he's been requested to step down by his party, because he has gone on record, even here in parliament, as saying that the ANC, in fact, at some stage he said the ANC comes first when it's compared with the Republic. So And he has gone on record as saying that he's a loyal member of the ANC. Perhaps he's likely to accede to the demands and the growing calls by his own party as well as South Africans for him to step down. But if he does not do that, and the focus will shift to the National Assembly, the question is, will the ANC vote with the opposition to remove the president, or will the ANC table its own motion? But then the problem is that there is a motion that is already on the table, that of the EFF, but it's scheduled to be debated next week on Thursday. But the EFF wants it to be brought forward. So those are some of the problems that we are seized with at this stage. And I gather that chief whips of various parties are hold up in a meeting to try and resolve some of these problems. And the Speaker of the National Assembly has also written to the EFF saying that she is in consultation with the Chief Whip of the majority party, as well as the Leader of Government Business in Parliament, that is Cyril Ramaphosa, with regard to this request by the EFF for that motion to be brought forward.
Definitely, Vianney. And speaking of that motion, we actually have EFF spokesperson Boyiseni Ndlozi, Dr. Boyiseni Ndlozi, on the line. Speaking about that motion of no confidence that they had put forward, it was scheduled to take place at 10 o'clock this morning. Things have changed. Mr. Boyiseni Ndlozi, very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us on SABC Newsroom. Can you give us some of the details as to why the motion has now been moved from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., I believe it is?
Well, Chantal, thank you first of all for having us. Well, it's very simple. Remember, we had given the Speaker of the National Assembly until 10 o'clock this morning, failure of which we're going to approach the court on urgent basis. So the 10 o'clock deadline related to her giving us a schedule of the motion of no confidence taking place this week. She has written back to us saying she needs to consult the Chief Whip of the majority party as well as the Leader of Government Business, and she could only do that today. As a result, we have postponed our deadline from 10 o'clock to 1300 hours today. And if we do not get a concrete date, that brings the motion from the 22nd of February to sometime this week, preferably tomorrow. We're going to go at court or to court on urgent basis, because that would mean they're holding Parliament in the country at ransom. I mean, Parliament hasn't had a single sitting of the Assembly to consider any business of the people, simply because, they're dilly-dallying around the removal of the law.
Now, of course, with the news just coming in just a couple of moments ago, there has been confirmation of reports and sight of ANC SG Ace Magashule as well as Deputy SG Desi Duarte handing over a formal recall letter to President Jacob Zuma. What is your comment on this?
Look, we anticipate, as we've been indicating to the people of South Africa, that Zuma will refuse to resign. And that is why we scheduled the motion of no confidence and requested it as early as December last year. When we put our motion of confidence to Mbeki, it was December last year. And we've waited for that long. So we anticipate, like reports have indicated yesterday, that we refused a recall by the ANC of the ANC. We will refuse, and the only institution, the only constitutionally qualified institution that can remove Zuma is Parliament. And that's where they have to come. They will have to hand him to Parliament, which is the body that elected him, to remove him from being a president. And remember, Chantal, the second motion that we will be putting forward relates to the dissolution of Parliament, because the substance of the motion of the EFF has to do with court outcomes that have ruled Zuma to have been in violation of the Constitution. But the same court outcomes have also ruled that Parliament did not failed in its duties, rather. It has failed in its duties to hold the executive accountable. It failed to impeach Zuma. And as a result, we can't just, remove Zuma and fulfill the careerist interests of Ramaphosa. Let us go back to the people of South Africa on an early election in the dissolution of Parliament, so that a new Parliament and a new leadership of the country can be elected, through the ballot and the mass participation of our people. It mustn't be a few politicians in backdoor air-conditioned rooms who simply decide on the future of South Africans. Let us involve the people of South Africa through the ballot for a new parliament to be elected that will elect a new president.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, EFF spokesperson, on that motion of no confidence being moved to later this afternoon. Still joining us via Cape Town is our editor, Vuyani Green, parliamentary editor at SABC. Very good morning to you. Still staying with us, of course, we've just spoken to one of the opposition there, EFF spokesperson Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, saying that they are still going ahead with their motion of no confidence. And of course, still pressing with the issue going forward that Parliament needs to be dissolved. Take us through what that process would actually be like.
Well, Chantal, the first point I just want to clarify is that the EFF apparently it's a deadline that they've given to the Speaker. It was at 10 o'clock this morning. And then that 10 o'clock came in and gone, and then the EFF extended the deadline to the Speaker to bring forward that motion. It extended it by 1 o'clock, failing which they've threatened to go to court. It's not exactly the motion that's going to be debated at 1 o'clock. Secondly, with regard to the other issue, just 2 points I want to make. The first one is that if a motion of no confidence in terms of Section 102 of the Constitution and Rule 129 of the National Assembly rules succeeds, then that has got serious implications, because it means the president, the deputy president, cabinet members, as well as deputy ministers will have to resign, all of them. And then the Constitution says that the Speaker of the National Assembly will have to act as the acting president for a period no more than 30 days, within which the National Assembly must meet and elect a new president. Now, coming to the issue of Section 50, which the opposition say that, especially the EFF, say that they are going to table another motion for Parliament to be dissolved in terms of Section 50. Of course, the Constitution, that section allows the National Assembly to be dissolved. But then that section, it spells out certain conditions that must be present in order for that to happen. The first one is that the president can dissolve the National Assembly if the National Assembly itself passes a resolution to that effect. Another section, I think 50, subsection 2B, says that if the National Assembly within 30 days is unable to elect a president, because the National Assembly that elects a president is unable to elect a president, the National Assembly must be dissolved and fresh elections must be called within 90 days. I mean, that's my reading of that provision is what lawyers will say it's peremptory. In other words, it's obligatory. They must the National Assembly must dissolve. So the reason why I'm raising this, it's because this ties in with Section 102, where if the president, the executive, and everyone else resign after a motion of no confidence is passed against the president, and the Speaker, takes over as the acting president for a period of 30 days, if the NA is unable to elect a president during that period, the Constitution says that the National Assembly must be dissolved. But then, of course, these matters, I think, are matters that will be ventilated in court if, for instance, the opposition doesn't have its way. If the ANC rejects this motion for National Assembly to be dissolved, perhaps the opposition will go to court and ask the court to intervene. And these are matters that are likely to be ventilated in a court of law. But the point I wanted to make is that the Constitution spells out the conditions under which that eventuality should take place. At this stage, we are not there. We still have a president who's in office, and should the president decide to resign, then there will be an acting president. But if not, then we'll see how the situation is going to unfold.
Definitely. Let's touch base with presidential correspondent Mzwandile Mbeja, who has been giving us live updates from outside the presidential guest house in Pretoria. Very good morning to you once again, Mzwandile. Of course, you have earlier confirmed actually seeing ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule leaving. What more details can you give us around the precinct at the moment?
We also have seen the Deputy Secretary General, Jessie Duarte, also leave. She left at about 5 minutes ago. So that then does tell us that the message that the NEC had mandated them to deliver to President Jacob Zuma has been delivered. So the next step now we are watching is what is it that President Jacob Zuma will do? Is he going to make a public statement? Some sources last night had said at his meeting with the ANC president and the Secretary General, he had said so they need to come and inform him formally, and then from there he will then make a public statement. So what we are waiting for now is the next move from the president, because his party has decided that he needs to be recalled from office, and we don't know for sure the timeline or rather the contents of the letter, but we know that a recall has been made, and he will have to respond accordingly. But as you know, the party, the recall part, the recall question is more of a recommendation, because the political party cannot remove the president. So basically what the NEC has done now, they have thrown the ball into President Jacob Zuma's court. Then it's up to him to hit the call. But from the statements and the utterances of the past, the president has always said if the party were to decide to ask him to step aside, he would gladly so, because he served at the pleasure of the party. But of course, we know there are so many factors and so many issues that will inform certain decisions. So, yes, we wait. We suspect perhaps he will, maybe later today or perhaps tomorrow, inform the nation of what he thinks, how he's received this, and what is the way forward. For now, we've been just monitoring some of the cars getting in here, and I can see that some of them are having ministers, though it's very difficult to see which are some of the ministers coming in here, because they've got those black tinted windows, so you can only see because it's the blue lights, and then you can see that there's someone inside, but you can't really determine who exactly is the person. So we will give you an update if there's anything new, Shante, that happens here, but we will be your eyes and ears. Let's hear what's happening from elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Mzwandile Mbeki, presidential correspondent for SABC News in Pretoria. Still with us, joining us via Cape Town, SABC's parliamentary editor, Vuyani Green. Of course, Vuyani, some interesting words used there from Mzwandile Mbeki, saying that it's more of a recommendation. The recall letter is a recommendation. Just your final sentiments before we wrap up this morning.
Yes, Shante, Mzwandile, my colleague, was reinforcing the point that I made earlier, that political parties can persuade their deployees in government, including the president, but from a constitutional point of view, they don't have powers to remove a president. It's only the National Assembly which has got powers to elect a president and to remove a president. As Mzwai was saying, now the ball is in the president's court. He can decide to step down and follow the former President Thabo Mbeki's suit, or he can decide to ignore those calls from his own party. Then the focus will then shift to Parliament, and the ANC will have to use constitutional measures which are prescribed in the Constitution to remove a president. Those sections that I referred to, 102, which deals with a vote of no confidence, and the more cumbersome one, 89, which is very difficult, and it's likely to take a long time if they choose to use that method, because that means that they will have to set up a mechanism or a body to investigate, to give the president his right of reply and all that before the matter comes to Parliament to be voted to. And the president may decide to take those measures on judicial review that will drag the process further. So the quickest way is Section 102, the vote of no confidence. But of course, that's if the president does not heed the call by his own party to step down.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, SABC Parliamentary Editor Vuyani Green, around the ANC transition and the developments that we've seen over the past couple of days and, of course, today. And our question of the day that we have been asking here on SABC Newsroom is what we were expecting coming from the ANC's midday press that is set to take place just after 2 p.m. Of course, it is subject to change on at SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of the tweets coming in. Limit_TH, I expect nothing new but to make Zuma a better person than South Africans. This one coming in from Daphne. They're just going to say they gave him an ultimatum and he refused to resign, and then they will say that they will not force him and it is his choice. Wandile says, a motion of no confidence against the president is on the cards. Zuma is a liability to South Africans. Thursday should be a debate. Go Z. Let's have a look at our poll that we have been running. Still all things ANC. This time, though, we have some of the inputs from the opposition, and we're asking you, do you support the calls by the opposition parties to dissolve Parliament? We have been looking at that and the processes around that this morning, but just over 800 votes coming in. 60% of you are saying yes, you do support the calls by opposition parties to dissolve the Parliament. 40% of South Africans and people commenting on Twitter, our poll this morning, are saying no. Well, Sipana says, what's the use of dissolving Parliament, because the only thing that they're supposed to do is deal with President Jacob Zuma. Infinite Silence, also known as Tsepo ME1, says we need a fresh start as a nation. We need to reboot the South African dream, the mission to become a nation united in our diversity to defeat all of our adversities. This one coming in from Makosonke. They can do as they want. All of them are useless. The ruling and the opposition are a bunch of liars. Thank you very much for interacting with us on both our question and polls of the day here on SABC Newsroom. For now, though, let's take a short break. The breaking news this half hour, the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule and Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte were at President Jacob Zuma's official residence in Pretoria, where they delivered a formal letter of recall for the governing party. Meanwhile, the EFF's motion of no confidence is in the spotlight today as National Assembly Speaker Balek Mbete faces a deadline to bring it forward or face court action. The High Court in Cape Town is expected to hear an urgent application by City Mayor Patricia de Lilles this morning in relation to the vote of no confidence against her. Well, leading with the ANC leadership expected to brief the media on the latest in the recall saga in just a couple of hours, we take a look at how former ANC President Jacob Zuma rose to prominence within the African National Congress.
he had to deal with many challenges in the ANC, which almost brought the movement to its knees. He became President General in the midst of the Great Depression, which would have challenged any leader. He also faced other impediments, which included the following. The chiefs, who were one of the main benefactors of the ANC, had gradually withdrawn their support. Given these and other challenges, the ANC began to decline considerably.
You'll be forgiven for being confused here. President Jacob Zuma was not speaking of himself in the third person. Rather, it was the founding father of the ANC, Pixlika Isaka Kaseme, he was referring to. Historians describe Kaseme as one of the most controversial presidents of the ANC. Among others, the ANC President General was accused of stealing from his own people. Some might accuse Zuma of the same thing. In 2005, after the corruption conviction of Zuma's former financial advisor, Shabir Sheikh, then President Thabo Mbeki summarily fired him. A corruption indictment followed.
Goli has informed former Deputy President Zuma that we have decided to bring criminal charges against his person. Such charges will be constituted by, among others, 2 counts of corruption. Mr. Zuma will in due course be informed of the date, time and place where he will have to avail himself at court to face these charges.
The end of a checkered career, but like a phoenix, Zuma rose from the ashes. He offered to resign as deputy president of the ANC. The NGC of 2005 refused to accept it. In the next 2 years, the wily politician demonstrated his mettle, shoring up support from Polokwane to the distant hills and valleys of the Eastern Cape. He had now machine-gunned to the forefront of the ANC. A shred intelligence operative, he ramroded his way to the ultimate power in 2007, brushing aside Mbeki's vain try for a third term. At the time, he had some memorable backers.
The manner in which the National Prosecuting Authority has behaved shows that this is part of a political conspiracy aimed initially at preventing Mr. Zuma from becoming president of the ANC and later president of our republic.
It's very clear that the country is facing a political crisis, an attack on our judiciary, not by Jacob Zuma, not by COSATU, not by the ANC, not by SACP, an attack by the people who are supposed to be the champions and the defenders of that judicial system themselves.
If these people say after 14 days will be arrested for saying we'll defend Zuma and the ANC, we'll never apologize. We are prepared to go to jail. We are prepared to be charged by our own government. We are prepared to serve in jail because we said we'll defend the ANC.
These were the kingmakers for the chess tactician.
Comrade Jacob Zuma, 2,329.
Behind this facade of unity brewed a deadly political battle.
I warned, and at the time I spoke to the 2 leaders separately, and I did say to them, we were starting a process we would never be able to put a stop to. That they were going to divide the African National Congress, and that as the moment we came out of Polokwane, and that process had taken place where we tried to get a third term for our President Thabo and the then President Thabo and Deputy President, we would never be able to control that turning of the tide. It was a negative turning of the tide. I spoke to both of them individually, and each one of them said, "Mama, you are saying that because you don't know that man."
Polokwane marked a turning point for Africa's oldest liberation movement. Policies were adopted, including removing the scorpion sting. Probably the most controversial was a remedy to what became known as the two senses of power.
In the run-up to the 2007 Polokwane ANC National Conference, a spurious argument emerged within the ANC about a non-existent problem of two centers of power, so-called. And as a result of this, the Polokwane Conference took the diametrically opposed position to the Mahikeng Conference. It now said, instead, that any person elected as president of the ANC would be the ANC candidate for the position of President of the Republic. This also meant that the provincial chair of the ANC would be the provincial premier. This unfortunate decision meant that formally the ANC took the decision that occupation of senior positions in the ANC was a guaranteed route of access to state power.
The policy meant that Jacob Zuma, who would be facing 18 corruption charges, must become president of the Republic should the ANC secure victory in the 2009 elections.
And he insists that stepping down as the ANC's presidential candidate is not an option.
If I did so, I will be pleading guilty when I'm not guilty.
The NEC set up a task team that would look into this quagmire.
What I did was, given that responsibility by the NEC, I applied my mind, I applied every moment of my time, like I do with everything I do. We looked into the allegations against Comrade Zuma. We explained to the NEC what it is that the allegations were pointing to, and we assisted the ANC to understand Jacob Zuma's case. And I am very proud of the work that I did because I understood the law better, I understood the cases better, I was able to explain to the ANC. The ANC took a decision on their own in a meeting about what stand we should take. So I was an enabler of unpacking the charges and understanding what they are. I wasn't out there saying, let's go free Zuma from behind the bars. Okay. No.
But before the task team could be set up, there was a pressing issue: political interference in Zuma's prosecution. The judgment was later overturned by the Supreme Court of Appeal. In an unprecedented move in September 2008, the ANC NEC under Zuma, Mbeki was recalled from the highest office in the land. The one who sacked became the sacker in a tit-for-tat political move.
I announce that I have received a letter from the President which reads as follows. I want to thank the honorable members for allowing me to serve the country in the high office, and I thank you also for your support and candor during the time we worked together. Thank you very much and continue with the good work.
We will ensure that the election of a new president takes place as speedily as possible. There is no reason for South Africans to be apprehensive. The transition will be managed with care and precision. We will announce the name of our candidate in Parliament at an appropriate moment. We have a cabinet, we have in cabinet many experienced ministers, including the Deputy President of the ANC, Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe. I'm convinced that if given that responsibility, he would be equal to the task.
There was a new sheriff in town, and he never missed a target. The snake was dead, as Jacob Zuma once famously said. A seat at the union buildings was certain, apart from the last 18 hurdles, corruption charges that is. And on the eve of the elections, those charges were dropped.
In the course of the representations, the defense made certain very serious allegations about alleged manipulation of the NPA and indicated that these were substantiated by recordings of certain telephone conversations which it intended handing into court during the intended application for a permanent stay of prosecution. The NPA decided it would listen to these recordings because it felt that the allegations were serious enough to impact on the NPA's decision if they were true.
For nearly a decade, that decision shrouded his presidency. At the 2009 ballot box, the political landscape shifted, and the ANC would compete for votes with former cadres and battalions who broke away under the banner of the Congress of the People following the decision to recall Mbeki. The ANC's majority have dwindled, but the 65.9% of the ballots secured Jacob Zuma the throne.
In the presence of everyone assembled here, and in full realization of the high calling I assume as President of the Republic of South Africa, I, Jacob Zuma, swear that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, observe, uphold, and maintain the Constitution and all other law of the Republic.
But a loss for the ANC, which lost its grip on the Western Cape. It's under Jacob Zuma that the ANC's fortunes would dwindle. But the ANC's membership during its centenary celebrations in 2012 reached over 1 million. Zuma was also tasked with delivering a lecture on all presidents of the ANC, except for himself, of course. It was during this period that Zuma's political tight-knit weave was unraveling.
It is under President Zuma that we have seen the youth of the ANC being traumatized, the youth of the ANC being expelled from their own home. It is under President Zuma that we have seen a critical voice of the voiceless being suppressed in the ANC. We have seen under President Zuma democracy being replaced with dictatorship.
Became more graphic. The ANC closed ranks.
City press, don't buy. Don't buy. City press, don't buy. Don't buy. City press, don't buy.
Although friends became foes and ANC members litigated furiously against other ANC members under Zuma's leadership, the 12th elected president of the ANC secured a second term with an overwhelming majority in Mangaung. The mild-mannered man who supported Jacob Zuma in Polokwane and served as his deputy unsuccessfully contested the position.
I would like to thank the officials, particularly the President, for affording me the privilege to speak after he has spoken. Protocol ordinarily doesn't allow that.
Out of this furnace, new alliances were forged. But the last term in ANC office would prove to be the most difficult for Jacob Zuma's presidency.
Madiba taught us unity is the rock upon which the ANC was founded. When we emerged from the 52nd national conference in Polokwane, we assumed that we're all in agreement that we would work for unity and collectively understood the democratic principles and internal democracy that prevailed within the movement. We did not monitor the process. We must not repeat that mistake. Unity will not happen automatically. We need to work hard for it.
That unity remained elusive. Julius Malema was out, expelled from the ANC only to start the EFF to contest state power. Zwelinzima Vavi was out, expelled from COSATU, while NUMSA, its biggest affiliate, packed its toolbox. Even from the various kingdoms, like during the Kaseme era in the 1930s, support for the ANC's leader was threatened.
Parting ways from government control. We do not want to be controlled by a state that is not credible. So we want the state to put its hands off the kingdom.
In 2014, a former ANC activist in the office of the Public Protector would be brave enough to find the president and his family unduly benefited from the 246 million rand Nkandla upgrade.
Pay back the money! Pay back the money! Pay back!
Nevertheless, the ANC supported the ballot box took a knock, dropping to 62.15%. The party suffered the worst humiliation during the local polls. 3 metros were gone, including Tshwane, the seat of government, the economic hub, Johannesburg, and Nelson Mandela Bay, named after the ANC's most popular president. And the Zuma Must Go campaign snowballed.
Humiliated our organization and undermined everything that we represent.
Stop corruption! Zuma must go! Stop corruption! I want you all to take a look. South Africa must rise! South Africa must rise!
A day after thousands of South Africans took to the streets calling on President Zuma to resign, hundreds of South Africans staged a similar protest outside the South African High Commission in London. Many expressed disappointment at President Zuma's apparent neglect to act in the national interest. Protesters also voiced their concern over the recent downgrade of South Africa by ratings agencies S&P.
And stalwarts too joined the chorus.
A body of significant comrades and colleagues who've been in this battle and will remain in this battle until we ensure that our victory in 1994 is in fact solidified and protected.
Amid the political crisis, unprecedentedly, former foes shared a platform, bemoaning the state of affairs.
We face serious challenges approaching a crisis.
Mr. Mbeki?
Well, I would say that we are actually in a crisis. Because I think 23 years into our democracy, with all of the expectations that there were among the people, the reality is that you still have millions of people who are poor, levels of unemployment too high. I mean, when you see the levels of poverty, you go around the country, urban and rural, it really breaks your heart. Then there's problems of governance. Now you have a report. Sure, it's an interim report on this issue of state capture. And that's a real challenge.
The calls for Zuma to resign became louder and even echoed by alliance partners who barred the ANC president from speaking at their events.
For the first time under President Zuma, COSATU was not consulted during the latest cabinet reshuffle. We also noted that some members of the ANC top 6 felt that there was no meaningful consultation by the president. COSATU, though, has been here before because we were not consulted when the e-tolls were implemented, when the employment incentive tax was introduced, and when the preservation of the Provident Fund was introduced.
They have come to a very difficult decision to say the president must step down. It's not something that we took lightly. It's because we were of the view that part of dealing with some of the problems that we are having, he must assist us by stepping down. It's not personal. It's a decision that, in our view, we thought would be a correct one.
It cost Blade Nzimande his job as Minister of Higher Education. But this was no ordinary member of the executive being shown the door. It is the man who stood by Zuma, the General Secretary of the Communist Party. And history would repeat itself, as during Sam's tenure, the SACP contested an election in 2017 for the first time post-democracy. The Integrity Committee too had written a letter that President Jacob Zuma must step down, but it was later withdrawn. Meanwhile, pressure mounted in the highest decision-making body between conferences for the president to take the plunge.
The full-blown discussion where members of the National Executive Committee, about 30, and opposed to 70 people, came there and said that the president must actually be withdrawn for the issue of cabinet reshuffle and so on. So that motion was defeated, and that was communicated to structures.
Similar motions in Parliament were defeated, 8 to be precise.
The results of the vote by secret ballot are as follows. The total votes, 384. The yes, 177.
But for the first time, at least 25 ANC members of Parliament voted for their president to leave.
Order, honorable members.
Among them, Dr. Makosi Khoza, who left to start her own political party.
It is because of factionalism that we have seen the emergence of splinter groups over the past 10 years, which negatively affected our movement, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Slate politics, another manifestation of factionalism, has also cost us many good and capable comrades in whom our movement has invested significantly.
Through his trials and tribulations, Jacob Zuma has shown that he's an astute politician, constantly outmaneuvering his critics, at least to the very end inside the party. His preferred candidate may have lost the race, but Jacob Zuma has been clear. This is not the last time we see of him in party structures.
No. And I'm happy because I'm at the door of retiring. I'm an outgoing president in all respects. And therefore, my major area of operation is going to be, among others, with the veterans.
It's the same veterans he humiliated 6 months before.
The reason why we have 7 days, it is because some comrades who call themselves stalwarts veterans went around the country organizing other comrades because they had some views, and organized those comrades and later reported to headquarters that they've organized comrades at about 101. And these comrades have concerns that they want to discuss. But they did not say we want to discuss this with the leadership of the ANC. They said they want a consultative conference. They took a decision on their own, outside the structures of the ANC, and presented that. At first, we thought it was very funny that so many comrades could sign a petition in the manner in which they did. Some of them are not as strong as they project themselves. We know them. But
in chess, when your defenses are breached, it's wise to attack. Zuma is not dubbed the comeback kid for nothing. Nobody knows exactly on which front he will attack. But he will not go gently into that good night. Alderin Simpier, SABC News.
All right, a look at President Zuma's political career in the ANC. A very interesting look at his political rise in the ANC. We will have more reaction and analysis for you coming up after this break. Stay with us. You're with the Midday Report. We'll get your headlines and more on the latest developments around the future of President Zuma.